What's up, guys? Don't forget to smash that like button, drop a comment, hype up the video, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe and join the family. Guys, if you want to support the channel and get something cool, check the first link in the description. Use my code HUGOHenriqueMore to get 10% off on anime lamps. The story begins in a serene place, by the riverbank, when a voice asks what Shui is doing standing there, staring at the scenery without moving. An old man approaches and wonders why the boy remains still. The protagonist calls him father, but the man laughs, saying he doesn't even seem to recognize his own father, calling him silly and asking him to help pull the net since they need to check how the fishing is that day. He even promises to show him some real skills later. Shui hesitates for a moment, but soon follows his father. They climb onto the boat, spending time together fishing, eating, and even drawing. Afterwards, still in the same place, they sit at the edge of the boat, simply admiring the view. At that moment, Shui notices a fish nearby and comments that it is a red carp. Without thinking, he dives into the water trying to catch it, but realizes the fish has disappeared. He then wonders why there are no fish there, and worse, why he cannot move after entering the water. Panic sets in, and he tries to believe his father will save him, but suddenly, everything goes dark. In the darkness, Shui calls for his father until he hears a voice asking if he just woke up. An old man approaches and asks if the boy misses his father. Noticing his hand tied with ropes, Shui asks what is happening. The man explains that Master Zhang was clever to trick him and use him as bait to lure aquatic beasts. But in reality, that's all he is, a decoy. He reveals that they are all on a boat, watching over him, and that he is still deeply asleep. The protagonist realizes it was all just a dream and reflects that it has been a month since he arrived in that world. The body's original owner had fallen gravely ill and died, and at that moment Shui took his place. He also recalls that the former owner had lost his mother very early and grew up only with his father, who died of illness 3 months earlier, leaving deep feelings in his heart. During the month spent in the hospital, Shui did not fully understand that body's social circle and was deceived by a skilled liar, becoming bait to capture monsters. Over time, he discovered that this world hid different types of supernatural abilities. Humans could cultivate power to reach unimaginable realms, and those who followed this path were called warriors. Likewise, creatures also evolved through cultivation and became known as such. Suddenly, a young man shouts that something is approaching, and the old man confirms it to be an aquatic beast. The protagonist looks back and sees the monster circling the boat, moving through the water. He thinks an aquatic beast should not be taller than half the height of a human. The creature begins shaking the boat, drawing closer once again. The young man declares this is the moment he has awaited for years, saying his punch carries 10 years of accumulated power, questioning whether it will be enough to face the beast. The creature then opens its gigantic mouth, swallowing everything and shattering the vessel. The old man panics, shouting he cannot die there. Looking back, he grabs a dagger, cuts the boy's hand, and throws him into the water. Shui sinks, still with his hands bound and now wounded. He tries to loosen the ropes with his teeth, but his blood spreads through the river, attracting even more of the beast. When he realizes there is no way out, Shui thinks of moving forward and asks his father for forgiveness. At that instant, he opens his eyes and believes he sees his father telling him to wake up. He gazes at him with hope, wishing it were real, and stretches out his hands to touch him. However, instead of his arm, he touches wood marked with the drawings they had made together. With effort, he manages to raise his head above the water and murmurs that this is his father's boat. The beast charges forward, dragging him back down as it grabs his leg. Shui thinks he has done his best and asks his father to forgive him. The creature releases his leg and swims ahead, opening its enormous jaws. Meanwhile, the boy's hand continues releasing energy into the river until something is summoned. The system manifests, notifying that Z activation is in progress, detecting a spirit obtained. A metallic sound announces successful acquisition and the possible awakening of water manipulation abilities. His body begins to recover. The protagonist awakens in confusion, realizing he has not been swallowed. He recalls the moment when the beast almost devoured him and notices he is still underwater. He wonders why now it feels like he is walking on land within the water, as if all resistance had vanished. New messages appear. Water flow control successfully acquired, ability to manipulate the current at the cost of physical energy. Shui ponders this ability and is surprised to notice that even his breathing remains steady, allowing him to survive underwater. His wounds also close rapidly, however, he suddenly feels pressure and sees the monster ahead, opening its colossal mouth wide. The protagonist panics and starts screaming until he opens his eyes and realizes the beast did not attack him, for it is bound by chains formed from the water itself. Shocked, Shui wonders if he was the one who created them and if this could be similar to the systems described in the novels. He reflects that within the water there seem to be no limits, and even control over it belongs to him. When the chains unravel from the creature's body, he realizes the domain has a time limit. The beast tries to bite him again, but Shui manages to dodge and concludes this cannot continue. He needs to find a way to subdue the enemy. New notifications appear. Plasma Command Seal ability successfully acquired, effect by inscribing ancient runes using the host plasma, possible contract with aquatic beast. The protagonist observes closely and thinks this might be the solution. The monster lunges at him once more, trying to devour him. Shui activates water flow control and thinks he must immobilize it before acting. The creature becomes trapped and then the current dissipates. The young man dodges again until he releases the plasma command seal in his hand and hurls it at the enemy, striking it head-on. The power unleashed is intense, and Shui understands this is a battle of willpower. He questions if he will fail while recalling a relative in the hospital and his deep desire to survive. He continues to release energy with full determination. Then, he manages to surface and collapses onto the riverbank, exhausted, whispering that he is still alive. The beast resurfaces above the water and Shui realizes that, in the end, he has subdued it. The system then notifies the owner is Liang Ku, displaying the data. The protagonist commands the creature to remain nearby and says he will summon it when needed. He thinks that after taming it, a mental link was created, allowing immediate contact between them, either by his will or that of the beast. The monster returns to the waters while Shui rises, reflecting that he needs to go home, find something to eat, and rest. Luckily, the inherited memories include knowledge of the region, and the distance to his house is not far. As he walks, the aquatic crocodile swims through a narrow channel covered with flowers. In another area, similar to a village, the same old man from before walks beside the butler Zheng. A boy asks who those people are and if they are going to Wade's house. His partner replies that Lai Zheng is with the Jiao family and that Wade probably got involved in some trouble. Li grows suspicious and comments that Wade must be in danger. The group approaches a residence, and the old man thinks that if Liang had lost his life, all his belongings would fall under his administration, as compensation for the mission's failure. To him, the blame was Zhang's for being too weak. The man then breaks down the door and orders Zhang to enter, but when he looks to the side, he is stunned and asks how Liang is still alive. The protagonist, surprised, demands to know what they are doing there. The old man asks if he should not be dead. Zhang, confused, questions why they are acting so recklessly and what the old man meant by undead. The elder pronounces the boy's name, and Zheng Xiang realizes he is Liang. Shocked, he asks if he had not been declared dead, and remarks that surviving was pure luck. The family's butler orders them to capture him. Shui asks what they are planning, but two men seize him by force, telling him to stop spouting nonsense. The elder then reveals that Master Jiao had asked Zhang, the martial artist, to tame the aquatic beast to protect the villagers. However, Liang supposedly acted first, used the creature against Zhang, and caused the Jiao family to lose a great amount of resources, in addition to putting the villagers at risk. The protagonist counters, saying it was the opposite. They had trapped him and used him as bait for the beast. The old man accuses him of killing Zhang and still daring to return, calling him arrogant and a monster. Liang reflects that, in his past life, he truly was treated as a monster for being solitary and independent. He remembers how they mocked him, insinuating that a man without a homeland could only be a thief. The taunts haunted him, but Shui retaliated with hatred in his gaze. The provocations grew worse. They said if he was so brave, he should fight head-on. It was then that, in the past, he threw a punch in one of their faces. The reason he earned that nickname was clear. He was relentless. Even at the risk of exposing his abilities, it would never be in his nature to surrender without fighting. Now, in the present, the men begin to assault him. Liang is thrown to the ground, the objects around him scattering. And even while fallen, he thinks with anger that, even if they call him a monster, he will bite off a piece of their flesh. The old man orders him to be tied up and taken to the Jiao family, asking if they are short of people for that job and stating that the orphan child is perfect for the task. Zheng adds that if he agrees to become Master Jiao's adopted son, they might let it go, but otherwise that very day his legs will be broken. They leave the house, and the villagers watch, whispering that they heard in the neighboring county many people taken to the Jiao family vanished without a trace, and that this family has been taking in many people lately, which is truly suspicious. A voice then rises, challenging and asking who dares intimidate young Wade there. The village chief appears, declaring that he himself is still alive. Xiang calls him a foolish old man, but the chief replies that he is a high-ranking official of Great Shun and asks what Xiang intends, if he really plans to attack a public official. Zheng grits his teeth, and the village chief insists that all must show respect to his position before Master Jiao, warning that if they continue, they may faint on the spot. Xiang calls him a fool again and says he will not argue that day, but once he reports to Master Jiao, the matter will not be over. He orders his men to depart, and the old man remarks that he is just like his father, ungrateful. After they leave, the village chief advises Liang to avoid certain things whenever possible. The protagonist thanks him and promises to remember. Libo tells him to disperse, repeating the words, and Liang observes the power in his hands, reflecting that situations like this may happen many more times in the future. He acknowledges that the village chief can help him once, but not always, so he needs to become more proactive. The system is his opportunity. A notification appears. Water essence detected. Beast evolution progress. Shui is surprised and wonders about the water essence. He heads to the river and comments that after taming the Taihua crocodile, he can summon it at any time through the mental link. The water stirs and begins to shine until the crocodile emerges, but in a reduced form. Liang asks where his giant crocodile has gone, and the system informs that tamed aquatic beasts can control their energy consumption by adjusting their body size at will. Evolution progress. Chibi version. Minimal energy consumption. Shui is impressed and says that, as expected of the system, it even has this feature. He then asks where the water essence was found, requesting to be taken there. The protagonist dives in and follows the crocodile to a dark place, noticing that it seems to be an underwater cave in the mountain, a spectacle. Inside, Shui notices something glowing and wonders if it could be legendary mystical herbs. As he approaches, new notifications appear indicating that a mystical herb containing water essence has been discovered and can be absorbed. In this world, there exist natural treasures that accumulate extraordinary powers, plants with unique effects known as mystical herbs. It is said that in the Jiao mansion's courtyard there is a frozen lake with special aquatic chestnuts at the bottom, long used by the Jiao family head to attract warriors from different regions as patrons. Excited, the protagonist declares he wants to see how much water essence those herbs can provide and calls the crocodile for help, but the creature pretends to be asleep. Liang complains, saying it is so lazy it should be called immobile. Shui stacks the herbs on a stone until everything is ready, then begins to eat them. The system notifies that the discovered water essence can be used to improve spiritual synchronization and the evolutionary progress of aquatic beasts. The protagonist finds them delicious, and as he eats, he feels the essence increase until he is satisfied and declares that, while spirit attunement and beast evolution are good, the main focus must be himself. He activates the absorption option and feels his body improve rapidly. He thinks that with this power, he can face those people from that day, especially if he adds mastery over water flow. The system reports water flow control strength, 22.5 kilograms. Liang concludes that he should conserve for a few days, as he is already satisfied now. He reflects that the most important matters are the economic ones to come. Autumn is ending. The crocodile's blood flow decreases, and it is about to hibernate, making it unreliable for fishing. Suddenly, a fish is tossed to the ground by the crocodile itself. The protagonist picks it up and remarks that, after all, it is still reliable, thinking that this temporary economic crisis can be resolved by selling it at the market. Later, Liang appears carrying a sack in his hands, having sold a large yellow fish for 80 wen and making some profit. He reflects that the merchants in this world are nothing like the market women of his past life, since convincing them was much easier. After dealing with the matter of the water essence, Liang's next goal is to settle accounts with Lai Tu Zhang. The old man approaches, feigning cordiality, asking if that isn't Wade, and comments that there had only been a small misunderstanding between them the other day. He adds that he had been about to look for him to apologize, calling their meeting a coincidence. He says his boat is nearby and promises a good meal to clear things up, telling him not to worry. Liang thinks that it is just the two of them and wonders where he could escape if necessary. Shui smiles and replies that, since it's only the two of them, he feels perfectly at ease. Elsewhere, a group discusses the situation. Zheng comments that recent experiments at the mansion failed, resulting in many deaths. The mansion urgently needs materials for the elixir, and since Liang is an orphan without family, he would be the perfect choice. He asks if the old man understands, and the latter replies yes, assuring that the boy will not escape. He promises that the next day he will bind him with his own hands. Zheng declares that if he does the job well, Master Jiao will even ask great figures to help him ascend to immortality. The old man asks if this is true, and Xiang confirms, saying it is real. Excited, the elder says he too will become immortal, opens his robe revealing a symbol on his belly, laughs loudly, and says he will finally achieve ascension. Later, on a boat, the old man invites Wade to enjoy that beautiful and peaceful place, with no other boats in sight. He assures they will have a good meal together and settle the misunderstanding. Discreetly, he throws something into the food he's preparing. The protagonist questions if he is sure there are no other boats nearby. The old man insists yes, saying he checked the entire area carefully, and thinks to himself that once the boy drinks the fish soup, he may scream all he wants. But no one will come to save him. Liang stands up and remarks that this is perfect. Then Shui unleashes his ability against the old man's face, suffocating him until he cannot breathe. The protagonist stares at him coldly. At night, the old man awakens tied up. Alarmed, he realizes his situation, and Liang comments that he slept soundly. The elder asks what he intends, and Shui, holding a sack, replies that it seems he profited well, selling it to the Jiao family, valuing it at least 2 taels. The old man tries to justify himself, saying he can explain, but Liang tells him to look around and asks if the place doesn't look familiar. The elder recognizes it and says this was where they hunted the water beast. The crocodile emerges from the surface, frightening him. Liang strokes the creature and confirms that it truly was a water monster, but now it is his pet, asking if the old man wasn't the one who called him a monster as well. The man panics, screams that he truly is a monster, and begs not to be devoured, promising to reveal everything. Shui asks why Butler Zheng is so intent on taking him to the Jiao mansion, and the reason they hired so many servants. The elder explains that all are used as materials for Master Jiao to refine the immortal elixir required for ascension. Everyone captured was sacrificed for this purpose. Liang comments that this means innocent people were hunted and turned into resources. The old man claims he was forced, that he had no choice, but Liang thinks they are useless, and that when he exposes Master Jiao's followers, he will turn each of them into elixir material, making them beg for death. The elder still tries to speak, but Shui lifts a stone and strikes him, saying he has already seen it all, showing his monstrous side. He reflects that taking him to the mansion would only mean being refined into elixir, and if he doesn't eliminate him now, he will lose his own life. The old man's body sinks into the waters and plasma slowly spreads. The next day, Liang emerges from the water, relieved, thinking that having power makes everything much more convenient. 3 days have already passed since he eliminated Lai Tuzheng, and to avoid suspicion, he has been living like a common fisherman, leaving early, returning late, selling fish at high prices, and avoiding the Lotus Lake as much as possible. As for the boat, he managed to cover things up using Lai Tuzheng's identity, but he knows the Jiao family's forces will not let the matter go unpunished. The sudden disappearance will ultimately fall on him, and therefore he must become a martial artist as soon as possible. The fastest way is to join a martial arts school. In Pingyang, there are 3 schools, with the most powerful being the Yang clan's martial hall. They say the clan chief possesses immense strength, capable of crushing gold and splitting stones, remaining unmatched at the top. While considering joining the martial hall, Liang knows the Jiao family will not dare touch him, since the disappearance of a disciple would cause great problems for the school. However, the entrance fee ranges from 5 to 8 tiles, and he only has 2 tiles and 8 wen, forcing him to find a way to increase his earnings. The crocodile rests on his shoulder, staring at him intently, and the protagonist comments that perhaps he has been worrying too much about the future. He reflects that since the last update, his body has slowly been adapting to the growth of strength. His mental power has also increased considerably, allowing him to control 2 to 2.5 additional immobiles, and he decides to continue fishing. Liang dives and, as he glides through the water, thinks that since his awakening, his movements there have become increasingly natural. His main training method has been running against the immobile, and he intends to continue. The crocodile follows while Shui swims even faster, using his ability to compress the water flow beneath his feet and propel himself forward. The drawback is the high stamina consumption, making the movement unsustainable for long periods. But for now, no one would be able to match such speed. Suddenly, something passes by his side and the protagonist wonders what it is, soon concluding it is a mystical fish. In this world, some species have evolved through unique powers, and those inhabiting the Great Swamp are called mystical fish. Finding one is already rare, but he spots 2 at once. Liang orders the immobile to chase them. The crocodile increases its body size and charges at the fish while Shui quickly approaches, regretting not having brought a net. Using water flow control, the protagonist manages to restrain one of the fish and grabs it, satisfied with the catch. While thinking about the good profit he will make, a colossal presence approaches. Distracted for a moment by the thought of money, he is suddenly pulled and hurled against the riverbed, spitting plasma. Before him emerges a massive and shadowy creature. Liang is startled and recalls hearing about a man-eating catfish with 6 whiskers that prowls the deep waters of Yixing City. He finds it incredible to have encountered it, but soon wonders if he is facing yet another deadly attack. Shui reacts quickly, using water flow control to block the beast's approach and thanking his reflexes for being fast enough. The creature tries to strike him again. He barely dodges and thinks about how terrifying it is, even imagining that it might be mocking him. A crash echoes as the crocodile strikes it by surprise. The immobile lunges once more at the beast and Liang praises it, saying it was a good job and that now is his chance. He thinks that if he doesn't tame it at that moment, he will be doomed. He focuses and releases the plasma command seal, believing his extra mental energy will be enough to subdue the creature. The system, however, warns him, host action resulting in mental overload, energy too low, attempt to tame aquatic beast may cause backlash, recommends immediate interruption, overload detected. Despite the warnings, the protagonist continues pouring mana into the monster, which begins to feel a strange pressure. On the surface, Liang emerges gasping, leaning on the boat and breathing deeply. He tells himself he managed to return and admits he didn't expect the fat catfish to have such high mental resistance, to the point of almost making him lose control. Looking to the side, he realizes he succeeded and thinks the rewards are equally valuable. The system notifies, by taming the 6-whiskered catfish, evolution becomes possible, consuming 800 units of water essence to transform it into a tiger-headed catfish. Liang laughs and comments that since it's so fat, he'll call it big, because the name suits it well. He then decides to process the day's catch. The crocodile opens its mouth, revealing inside it the smaller, mystical fish, and Liang affirms it is truly reliable. He looks at the captured fish and decides to try the smaller one first to test the effects. Upon eating it, he feels the immediate increase of water essence, keeps the small horn as a keepsake, and notes that he obtained 18 points, the equivalent of 18 mystical lotus roots. He reflects that if a small fish yielded that much, the larger one should provide at least 3 times more, reaching 53 points of water essence. With this, he calculates that his fusion rate, already at 7.5%, could quickly surpass 10% by consuming both the small and the large fish. But he needs to hold back for now, since saving for the tuition is the priority, even though the amount he has is already more than enough. At the entrance to Yixing City's market, Liang wonders if last month's festival hadn't just ended and what they could be celebrating now. Chen displays a mystical fish and tells everyone to look. It's a specimen that only appears once every century, weighing exactly 1.8 kilos. The crowd is impressed, commenting that the brat from the Chen family really has skill. Liang asks if he also managed to catch a mystical fish and tells them to step aside. The curious onlookers question why he is in such a hurry. Shui approaches the vendor and comments that the Shangrao seal must have been blessed by the river god, since 2 mystical fish were caught in a single day. The old man retorts, saying not to talk nonsense, because that boy caught only 1. The protagonist clarifies that he wasn't referring to Chen's fish, but to his own. People laugh, mocking him and saying that ugly fish couldn't possibly be considered mystical, accusing him of picking any ordinary fish just to inflate the price. The laughter grows louder. Ji also grins, until a man approaches and identifies the fish as a red plasma perch. It is Huchi, one of the martial instructors of the Yang clan's hall whose presence commands respect. He asks how much the fish costs. Chen turns the question back, asking what value he considers fair. Qi asks the weight, and Ji answers, 1.18 kilos. Hu proposes 150 wen, and Chen, thrilled, accepts immediately. At that moment, Shui asks him to appraise his fish as well. A man nearby criticizes, telling him to be ashamed and not bother the instructor. Others warn that if he angers Hu, everyone will suffer the consequences. But Qi observes carefully and is surprised, recognizing the specimen as a bullhorn pomfret. The protagonist confirms, adding that it weighs 1.61 kilos, while thinking that, so that's what it's called. Hu evaluates it and offers 325 wen. People are shocked, commenting that entire families hadn't saved that much in generations. Chen is also astonished. A man warns him to be careful since he might end up earning money he won't live to spend. Liang accepts the offer and Ji walks away displeased. Shui asks why his fish is worth double the red plasma perch. Qi explains that the bull pomfret's horns have medicinal value, being refinable into pills that increase vitality and help overcome blood stagnations, making them especially useful in his current cultivation stage. The protagonist thanks him and reflects that it was good he had kept the small pomfret horn. Later, back in the village, Liang counts the money when Libo approaches, and comments that he is making the city proud. Shui replies that he still hasn't had the chance to thank him for last time. Li takes the opportunity to ask why he doesn't just hand over those 350 wen. The protagonist counters, asking if he has any idea how much it costs to enter the Yang clan's martial hall. Libo says yes, since his father is about to enroll him. He explains that the hall charges 350 wen tuition, without meals or lodging included. 500 covers lodging. 1,000 includes lodging and medicinal baths, though meals are still paid separately. Expensive compared to the other 2 halls, but it makes sense since it's the best. Liang calculates 350 wen fee, added to the savings of recent days, plus 325 wen from the fish and 130 wen from fishing, totals 455 wen, already enough. He declares that they will both enroll the next day. Li jokes that he's truly rich and won't have any trouble. At that moment, a voice announces the discovery of another mystical fish, drawing Shui's attention. At the Jiao mansion, Zheng reports that the bastard Zhang has disappeared, but traces lead to a boy named Liang. The master, irritated, responds that he doesn't want to be disturbed with trivial matters and orders them to deal with it themselves. Xiang glares with fury. At night, by the river, the protagonist prepares a meal in his boat, cutting ingredients while the crocodile watches him. Dinner is ready, and the aroma is appetizing. Liang tastes it and comments on the freshness and flavor. He shares it with his two animals, saying they deserve to try it too. The water essence increases, and Shui confirms that, as expected from a mystical fish, the energy flows quickly, visibly strengthening his body. He thinks he was truly lucky again. 18 points from the bullhorn pomfret last time, plus 24 now. The protagonist fiddles with the system and reflects that the power flows constantly, thinking that a sparring partner would be perfect at that moment. He notices that his water control ability has increased significantly, requiring only a small injection of energy to realize that the essence requirements for immobile and robust beasts have decreased. New notifications appear. The tamed aquatic beast, the crocodile, will consume 799 units of water essence to evolve into a horned crocodile, while the six-whiskered catfish will consume the same amount to evolve into a tiger-headed catfish. Liang thinks this is extremely mysterious and wonders whether it was created by human hands or developed naturally. On one side, a yin dragon, on another, a giant monkey like Wujiki, further ahead, gods with human heads and serpent bodies, and finally, an enigmatic emperor in a black robe. He concludes that there's no point in overthinking, since tomorrow he will join the martial hall and needs to strengthen himself quickly to deal with the Jiao family. The next morning, they get on the carriage. Libo comments that it's time to depart. The protagonist sitting beside him wonders how long the journey will take. Li is excited, talking nonstop along the way. When they arrive in Pingyang City, they get off the carriage and go straight to eat and explore the surroundings, surprised by the bustle. Elsewhere, a young man asks if the child mentioned will really pass through there. A muscular man replies confidently, saying he heard the boy from the Li family mention that they would be registering at the Yang family's martial hall that day. He adds that the boy sold a fish the day before and earned 325 wen, pointing out that he couldn't gather such an amount even by selling his own wife. The man beside him fears they will be taken to the yamen, but the muscular one insists he doesn't understand. Giving so much money to the martial hall is a waste, and they would manage the wealth better. He states that this entrance is the only path to the hall, and since few pass through, it's the perfect chance. He orders them to stay quiet as the targets are approaching. Li asks how many opponents his friend thinks he could face after completing his training. The protagonist answers that he doesn't know and reflects that he doesn't even understand yet how many he could fight at full strength, if he has even mastered anything at all. Then a young man blocks their path and the muscular man announces they've met again, demanding the money. He says they can choose, hand over the coins or end up buried by the roadside. His companions laugh loudly. Liang, serious, replies that he chooses to be buried. The muscular man charges threateningly, but Shui is faster and lands a solid punch. The men behind also attack, but the protagonist strikes them with direct blows, throwing them aside and making their noses bleed. He then approaches the muscular man again and delivers another punch, knocking him down and cracking the ground. Li comments in awe that he was fast, ending the fight in only 9 moves. Shui reflects that, as expected, his physical abilities have improved greatly. Libo, astonished, asks when he became so strong and if he even needs a master now. The protagonist laughs, saying maybe he's a genius, and urges them to hurry so they don't miss registration. Li watches him closely. In another area, a young man named Chang introduces himself and says they can call him older brother. The two greet him and he invites them to follow him to another instructor for testing and an explanation about warriors. This other one is Huchi, a direct disciple of Master Yang. Liang recognizes him and asks if he is the same warrior he saw at the market. Qi looks back and identifies the two. Libo remarks that it's a coincidence and asks if he knows the newcomers. Hu confirms, recalling that the bullhorn pomfret he used in his experiment was bought at that younger brother's stall. Chang declares that the two will train together and can spend the night at the hall. The two thank him respectfully. Qi then tells them to follow him, as he will test their innate bone structure. Shui asks what that means. Hu laughs and explains there's no reason to be nervous. It's just to identify which cultivation path suits them best. The protagonist admits he still doesn't fully understand the fundamentals of martial arts and asks the older brother to explain the principles. Qi nods and answers. Martial arts are divided into 4 basic stages: skin, flesh, bone, and plasma. The skin barrier hardens the body like oxhide, resistant and hard to pierce, increasing defense. The flesh barrier enhances muscle strength, making it possible to lift an adult with one hand. The bone barrier allows raw power to be unleashed, performing feats such as breaking stones or splitting monuments. Finally, the plasma barrier represents complete refinement, firm and delicate like embroidery on silk, strengthening all capabilities. Deep down, everything comes down to a single word: refinement. But for ordinary people, no matter how hard they try, there will always be a limit. To overcome that limit, two things are indispensable: technique and medicine. The two ask about it. Who confirms? Methods refer to martial techniques, like the three-fist techniques of the Yang Martial Hall. With the right technique, one finds the ladder to ascend. The protagonist concludes that this refers to cultivation techniques and asks about medicine. Chi explains that techniques provide the path upward, but that path is steep and treacherous. To advance faster and more steadily, one needs a handrail, and that handrail is medicine. The bullhorn pomfret Liang sold is an example of such a resource. The protagonist thinks this is perfect, since with Zed, he should be able to acquire such things with ease. Hu advises them not to rush, as the martial path is long, and recommends focusing on each step. Shui thanks him and asks to evaluate his bone structure. From a distance, Yansai observes with his men and asks if this is the boy they were talking about. A voice replies that as long as he is excluded from the martial hall, his request will be granted. This is Zhao Shuiwan. Elsewhere, Zheng reports to the master that Liang is 15 years old, the perfect age to refine elixirs, similar to the third young master and also an orphan. He concludes that if they capture him, they can use him for refining. Master Zhao comments that Yuan has been frail since childhood, and that it is increasingly difficult to find a fetal pill from someone of the same age. He admits that Liang is indeed ideal material, but reminds that the boy is about to join the Yang clan's martial hall, and with Yang Dongxiang's temperament, it won't be simple to act. Zheng takes his leave. A leaf falls to the ground, illustrated with Liang's image. A hidden observer picks it up, thinking he must consume the celestial elixir and pass through the elixir opening, and that anyone in his way will lose their life. Meanwhile, Li comments that he never expected his friend to have such high-quality bone structure, while he himself only has a medium level, calling it destiny's manipulation. The protagonist replies that it must be talent. Libo asks him to wait, but Liang insists he follow quickly to the training grounds. At that moment, Li widens his eyes upon seeing Chen nearby and asks what he's doing there. Jie retorts, asking why he couldn't be. If Liang is there, he has the same right. Libo calls him a brat, and Chen asks if he wants to fight. Shui intervenes, reminding them they are all from the same city and shouldn't argue. He reflects that Chen is also from Yixing, 2 years older, a skilled fisherman known in the region, and that he had a good relationship with the body's former owner. He asks if Chen also came to practice martial arts. Jia confirms, saying everyone seeks strength, and that after selling the fish and saving enough money, he decided to enroll. The protagonist proposes they go together to the training field, since the elder brother is waiting, and Libo reminds them that if they don't hurry, they'll miss the chance. At the field, several warriors train together. Libo is already exhausted from so much effort, and the other two as well, until someone raises his hand and orders them to stop. It is Hu who authorizes a break and announces that in the afternoon, instructor Lu will continue the training. Li complains of fatigue and says he already thinks about quitting. Chen calls him weak. At that moment, some youths approach, saying they smell fish. Lu mocks them, asking if they were born from a fish's belly. Yan demands that each of them pay 100 wen to remain there. Libo rises angrily, but Jia urges calm to avoid trouble in front of the elder brother. The protagonist thinks that with his current strength, he doesn't know if he can handle those three. Lu provokes again, saying he's about to break through the skin barrier and would love to test. Liang reflects that if he were in the river, he would have the advantage. Li only mutters. Then a voice calls out to Lu, asking what they are doing. It is Qi who orders that if they have nothing to do, they should stand still for half an hour. Yan grumbles, telling Liang he was lucky and that there is no place for cowards there. Hu asks if he didn't hear the instructions, and Lu replies that he will. Libo shows his middle finger to them, but Chen scolds him, saying it's useless to act from behind. Shui thinks that he is still weak and needs to accelerate to grow stronger. He asks them to cover for him because he needs to go home for a while and skip the afternoon training. Li asks what happened, but Ji says he doesn't know either. The protagonist runs off alone, reflecting that this is the key to becoming stronger, and nothing can go wrong. Elsewhere, Li comments that his partner hasn't returned for an entire day. Chen retorts, saying the emperor doesn't seem worried and asks if the eunuch's claim Wade must have his own reasons. Libo reacts angrily, asking if he's looking for trouble, and Ji answers that maybe he just needs a beating. At that moment, the two notice something. Someone approaches. mocking that the heavens are smiling on him that day for letting him find those two cowards again. It's Lu who declares that this time there is no elder brother to support them. The two grit their teeth, and Yan states that now they'll see how he himself will cripple them. Meanwhile, in the depths of the water, the protagonist is with his two beasts. He thinks that both are already close to the strength of the skin barrier, but they still warned him with caution, which makes him question what kind of creature it could be. Liang observes the marks on the ground and concludes that, judging by the size, it must be something enormous. Shui reflects that after consuming the treasure fish last time, his synchronization rate reached 11.7%, allowing him to control 35 kilos of water. More importantly, his underwater perception range expanded from 1 to 6 meters, letting him sense the details around him. Suddenly, something appears before him so large he cannot tell if it's a monster or a crab. He wonders if a creature of that size could have developed consciousness since, according to Instructor Hu, any beast that surpasses the skin barrier is considered a spirit beast. By its size, it certainly is one, but it shouldn't be that powerful, otherwise the immobile one and the fat one wouldn't have managed to escape. Even so, he feels unprepared. He knows that to strengthen himself requires planning, but remembers the words of the old man who called him a monster and affirms to himself that, like his father, he also doesn't know what's good. He recalls Lu saying there's no place for cowards like them and decides that accidents and dangers have always been part of his life. Events capable of changing it demand risk, and the truly important things often happen by chance. He refuses to accept that, being within his reach, he will simply give up. He thinks of Lai Tuzhang, who tried to take his life and ended up losing his own, and questions if now they want to take his lotus field, but declares they'll see who has more skill. The two beasts advance to attack. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Chen is struck and falls to the ground. Lu mocks, asking if he has courage, and questions where the other companion has gone. Jie grabs a brick and smashes it, replying sarcastically that he went to his grandfather's house. The brick shatters, and Yan stomps on Jie's head, mocking that they truly seem to wish for their end that day. He orders his 3 men to guard the gate, saying he'll have fun torturing the two. His henchmen agree. Libo stands and charges at Yan, but Lu grabs his arm and twists it, ordering him to speak again. Yan turns to Chen and, staring at him, says his eyes are too sharp, so he'll rip them out to see how he trains afterward. Li yells, calling him a bastard, and demands he stop immediately. Lu brings his finger close to Chen's eye, who screams in pain until a voice orders them to stop. In the depths, the creature bites a rock and shatters it. The protagonist dodges its strikes, realizing the shell's layer is incredibly heavy and nearly impenetrable. The crocodile charges at the enemy while Liang projects a stream of water but starts coughing. Noticing he's losing control, his mental energy failing. Sounds echo and the catfish dashes toward the beast. Shui orders the fatty to attack. The clash resounds, something bright breaks, and the protagonist realizes it's his lotus. The creature strikes him, throwing him far as he spits plasma. Liang thinks he might not get out alive. The monster approaches, but he notices it instinctively protects its abdomen with every blow it receives. That can only mean its weak point is there. He decides he had been planning this attack all along, to compress the water current at the tip of his wooden spear to maximize the impact. With no choice, he resolves to spend all his mental energy constructing the Bing Huan, extending the spear in 2 stages. The system warns that mental energy levels are too low, that control over the aquatic beast could become dangerous, and recommends the host stop the action. Liang, however, keeps advancing, thinking that there they'll see who has more courage. Shui releases his mana, repeating in his mind that the lotus field is his. The attack pierces the creature's body, and the protagonist gets excited, believing he has won. But Liang ends up closing his eyes. When he regains consciousness, he asks why he fainted again, and if it was the 2 of them who saved him. Shui thanks them. His head aches. It seems he will need to use the technique more carefully next time. Then he notices something nearby and asks what it is, a demonic crab. He asks if the 2 of them brought it there and comments that such a crab provides an incredible amount of water essence. The crocodile points at the creature and Liang realizes it's female. He approaches and questions whether those are crab eggs, regretting that if he could tame the giant crab, his power would increase greatly. Since he cannot tame the adult female, he observes that inside the eggs are small crabs, and wonders if the plasma domain talisman could tame these eggs. Shui cuts his own hand and places his palm on an egg. The talisman symbol is invoked on the shell, and he wonders if he himself generated it. The egg begins to shake and cracks. Out comes a crab. The system notifies that a stone crab has been successfully tamed and that it can evolve by consuming 8,000 water essence points to become a stone claw crab king. Liang holds something in his hand and starts eating. His fusion rate rises, light envelops his body, and his strength grows steadily. His 3 beasts remain by his side. Shui realizes his wounds are completely healed, a true miracle. His fusion rate has reached 36.6%. Beyond the physical improvements from eating the mystical fish, he gained extra energy from the fusion process and now feels his own blood energy. According to the instructor, he should be close to breaking through the skin barrier, perhaps even stronger. He says the two can keep the crab meat and remaining eggs since the meat won't stay fresh for long and each egg only yields 6 water essence points. Not worth saving. As for the fist, he cannot let it eat members of its own kind. It would be cruelty. So, given its fist size, he names it Little Fist Crab. If he manages to break the skin barrier within a month, he should officially become a student of the Martial Hall. Until then, the Jiao family will no longer be able to threaten him. Now he just needs to return to the Martial Hall to train tomorrow. Elsewhere, Lu continues beating the two boys until someone arrives and orders him to stop. It is Xiao Hui who reminds them that the Martial Hall has its own rules. Yan replies not to blame him, that he is only following the orders of the third young master Jiao, and asks whether he will follow the rules of the hall or the Jiao families. He tells them to look closely at that boy, saying he left the Jiao family for only a few days and already forgot who his master was. He argues that if the Jiao family hadn't taken him in, where would he be now, and wouldn't it be better to remain a cowardly, obedient dog? If he even has the courage to defend himself. He reminds him that his father is still on Jiao property, suggesting he should consider that. Xiao apologizes and thinks of his father, stating that if he can protect his family, he doesn't care about the rest. Lu agrees. Be a good dog. Then Chen spits in Yan's face, saying he can't stand his tricks and finds him pathetic. Yan wipes the spit and denies knowing anything. Lu steps on Li's arm. Libo screams in pain. Yan says that if Li plays the hero, it will continue like this. He doesn't even need to attack personally, just make his friends suffer. Ji calls him a bastard and challenges him to come closer, but Yan asks if anyone will come save them now. He reminds them the instructor isn't present and mocks who they think they can rely on. His men begin to act. When Lu looks back, someone is there. The protagonist. He sees his injured companion, swears he'll knock out every tooth from that man, and releases a terrifying aura. From afar, two people watch. Hu comments that it's his own fault, that he was too happy to have broken through the plasma barrier that day, drank too much, and arrived late, and that's why it happened. The master remarks that he had never realized how cold Xiao was. Perhaps coldness is his nature, but the concern he showed was genuine, and now he has withdrawn. Precisely because of that, he cannot break through the plasma barrier. A warrior without courage is like a body without breath, says the master, referring to Yang Dongxiang. Qi then orders them to go help Liang, reminding them that he only entered the martial hall that day. Lu is close to breaking through the skin barrier, and there's no way to defeat him in a direct fight. The master tells them to wait, stating that the plasma energy of that boy is interesting. Lu laughs disdainfully and asks if they really believe they can break his teeth. He himself believes that will not happen. The protagonist repeats that he will indeed break all his teeth. Liang charges forward. Yan scoffs, calling him a mere inferior fisherman, and orders his men to seize him. Shui reacts with a flying kick against one of them, dodges attacks, and continues striking the others. Ding tries to knock him out, telling him to take the kick and not grow arrogant. But the protagonist, using his speed and strength, strikes his face quickly and declares that now it's the last one's turn. Lu asks if he thinks that just by winning he can stand against him, explaining that spilling blood and energy is only the first sign of nearing the skin barrier. The two lock eyes and begin trading fierce blows. Liang glares back and lands a punch that hurls him away, declaring he's nothing special. Yan charges forward wielding a blade and stabs him, calling him a filthy fisherman, asking who protects him and what it's worth, since he's nothing but a lonely orphan. At that moment, Shui grabs his hand and scolds him, calling him shameful, a despicable coward. The protagonist unleashes a barrage of punches until he stops, leaving Lu collapsed on the ground, unable to move, begging him to stay away and asking if the instructor nearby doesn't intend to intervene, since he was attacking his own companions. Then someone approaches, tossing a sword to the ground and stepping forward. It is Dong, who names Lu, Shui, Wei, and Ding, declaring that the 6 of them are no longer welcome in that martial hall, and orders that Xiao be taken to the confinement room, as he will deal with him later. Liang watches and wonders if this could be the legendary Yang, thinking that after such a grave mistake they cannot remain in that hall. Shui recalls Yan's words about being a lonely orphan, and the protagonist questions if, in the end, it still wasn't enough. Xiong asks his name and Liang answers. Dong then asks if he is interested in becoming his direct disciple, leaving Shui astonished. Xiong extends his hand. The next day, at the Yang residence, rumors spread that the master officially accepted a 9th direct disciple, described as a very handsome young man. A girl approaches, calling for Liang and handing him the ceremonial robes of the elder brothers, saying they will help him dress. The protagonist refuses, asking them to step aside as he prefers to dress alone. The young women leave smiling. Shui sighs, reflecting that 2 weeks have already passed since he defeated Lu. His injuries and those of his friends were healed thanks to Master Yang's treatment. Now he is no longer alone. He has a master, brothers and sisters, a solid support. The time has come for his revenge against the Jiao family. Elsewhere, a voice comments that night, Liang Shidi was on the brink. Hu asks if they can imagine someone who joined the martial hall for just one day, defeating another on the verge of breaking through the skin barrier. Shui recalls hearing this 2 weeks ago, and Chang adds that for the master to have liked the boy at first sight, he must be a true dragon among men. Qin teases, asking if the fourth brother is jealous of the little junior and what gift he gave him this time. Shui replies that he gave him a solid tungsten steel arm guard, calling it a mere token, while a voice warns not to provoke the fourth brother, since it must have been hard for him to save that up. Qi announces that the younger brother is coming out. The protagonist appears in his attire, greets his elder brothers and sisters, and sincerely thanks them for their generous gifts. Gang declares that he hasn't given his yet and prepared something special, a piece of tungsten steel, and that Liang can visit his shop anytime to choose what kind of weapon he needs. Liang thanks him. Chang states that the gifts have already been given and that now they must head to the main hall, so as not to keep the master and lady waiting. At the Jiao mansion, someone calls for Master Jiao. It is Zheng, reporting that Lai Tu Zhang's body was found and what was in his stomach has disappeared. Jiao strikes him immediately and asks if he has any idea the problems this will bring if exposed, warning that if the authorities knock on the door, he will have to offer his own head an apology. Zheng explains it was because of that boy who must have eliminated Lai Tu Zhang and released it. Jiao stresses that now the boy is Yang's personal disciple and asks if he himself wants to test Dong's blade, ordering him to listen well, no matter the means, just find it immediately. Zheng replies that he understands while the master remains thoughtful about the boy. At the Yang mansion, Xiong declares that he is grateful that he repays kindness, shows courage, firmness, and diligence in his path, and expresses the wish to accept him as a disciple, asking if he agrees. The protagonist replies that he is willing. Dong then declares that by joining his sect, he must remain humble, open-minded, diligent in self-discipline, respectful to teachers and elders, always filial in all things, never harming other disciples, never acting irregularly or abusing power to oppress, and asks if he understands. Liang replies that yes. Master Yang states that this is excellent and explains that from the moment he drinks that tea, he will officially become his 9th direct disciple. From now on, no one will be able to intimidate or insult him, for his master will be his pillar. He asks if he understands, and Shui replies yes. Elsewhere, warriors train until they decide to rest. They comment about the boy having received direct instruction from Master Yang, calling it a stroke of luck for a nobody, and that the best part was seeing Lu and his gang expelled from the martial school. They also mention that other investigators are keeping an eye on him. Xue thinks of the boy and is filled with irritation. Further ahead, Hu asks if he knows what the 4 barriers and 7 paths are. The protagonist replies that he only heard that skin, flesh, bone, and blood make up the 4 barriers, but he is unfamiliar with the 7 paths. Hu explains that the 7 paths are Wild Horse, Wolf Smoke, Tiger Hunt, Supreme Elephant, Heavenly Dragon, Furnace of Casting, and Rainbow Transformation. In the Wild Horse realm, a warrior at his peak can restrain dozens of horses without moving. In Wolf Smoke, the energy of the blood rises like smoke, reaching several meters high, and when released, it is as oppressive as a pack of wolves causing terror. In Tiger Hunt, the blood boils like a tide, and its force is so overwhelming that ordinary people tremble like rabbits before a fierce tiger. In Supreme Elephant, each movement shakes the earth, capable of toppling mountains and halting rivers, and those who reach such a level become great generals. In Heavenly Dragon, one attains the form of a divine dragon, able to break free of earthly ties, leap 3,000 zhang, and soar among the clouds, becoming a martial saint of a nation. As for the Furnace of Casting and Rainbow Transformation, little is known except that specialists in these realms reached a state of immortal ascension. Liang reflects whether the martial Tao of this world can truly be that grand, for ascension means returning to the previous world, and he wonders what his master's true level might be. Hu then asks if he knows how many martial schools exist in Pingyang City. Shui replies that there must be 3. Qi explains that the other 2 only remain in Pingyang because their level doesn't allow for more. But Master Yang stays because it's his hometown and his school has been number 1 for years, since he is the only one in the region to reach the Tiger Hunt realm. The protagonist thinks that with his system, he will be able to reach Tiger Hunt even faster. Hu concludes the morning lesson by saying that there is no rush in cultivation, as advancement must be gained step by step, truly mastering each stage. Liang thanks him and thinks that this will lessen the pressure from the Jiao family. Now he needs to capture a spirit fish as soon as possible to break the first barrier and become a true martial master. On the river, Shui fishes in his boat and murmurs that he cannot do it alone. The raft is no longer enough to hold the fish, and he considers changing boats. He laments still not having found a spirit fish and wonders when he will manage to catch one. The protagonist observes that his fusion reached 37%, and if he can get a spirit fish, he might break the first barrier. The system shows his stats until Liang notices something strange. A deafening sound echoes and he questions its source. The river begins to churn, accompanied by strong winds. Shui spots a primordial frog biting into a giant bird. The frog crashes onto the water, generating massive waves, and the protagonist falls along with the fish he had caught. The boat shatters, the bird lets out a thunderous cry, and Liang realizes it is a mental attack. Shui sinks to the bottom of the river and then awakens on the grass with the help of his beasts. He wonders if he fainted again and if they were the ones who saved him this time. He concludes the bird knocked him out with that cry and that the monster is terrifying. If that one is already so strong, capturing something even greater will be nearly impossible. The attempt failed. The boat was destroyed, the fish escaped, and his progress toward the first barrier was delayed. The crocodile approaches and Liang asks what it is. The beast opens its mouth, revealing a fish stored inside. Shui recognizes it as a horned butterfly fish and realizes he can now attempt to break the first barrier. The energy of the blood is a reflection of the martial artist's physical strength, but one does not become powerful just by having strong blood energy. Rather, it is because the physical constitution is strong enough to condense blood energy. Blood energy is not the cause of strength, but its result. Yet this result can reinforce the cause itself, creating a positive cycle capable of growing infinitely. In another place, the protagonist sits cross-legged on the floor in training posture, trying to concentrate while inhaling the smoke of an incense stick. This incense, a gift from Hu, helps martial artists break through gates more easily. The key to breaking through the Pi gate and becoming a martial artist is tempering the blood energy concentrated in the chest. After each session, this energy can be replenished with fish meat. It is already his 38th attempt, yet he still hasn't advanced. To pass through the Pi gate, he must use Qi and the inner strength of his blood to stimulate the fascia and skin of the body, achieving the effect of skin refinement. Qi and blood are the energy perceived in the chest when practicing martial arts, the essence condensed by the human body, the root of life itself. When he feels a warm current flowing from his chest and merging with his blood, the Qi will move, spreading through bones and limbs until it reaches the fascia and skin, transforming into a wave of heat. This is skin refinement. His heart races with each attempt. Liang opens his eyes and realizes it is the 40th, but something is still missing. The system displays his progress, 49%, still short of breaking through the Pi gate. He senses that upon reaching 50%, something important will change. However, the fish meat is gone, and lotus roots no longer have any effect on him. It seems inevitable that he must find another spirit fish. The protagonist looks out the window, wondering if dawn has come, until there is a knock at the door. Two men stand there, Cheng's father and Libo's father. Old Chen says that upon seeing him arrive late the previous night, his uncle asked him to confirm something. Liang asks if there is a problem and reflects that they are the parents of his companions, questioning the reason for their visit. Dakang replies that it is nothing serious. He only wanted to know if he had seen his son, absent from home for 2 days, and asks if he is still at the martial hall or wandering about. Chen adds that his own son has also not returned, which is why he came to ask if Liang knew their whereabouts. Shui explains that he arrived home late and forgot to inform them, but recounts that the three of them had stood out and caught the attention of the instructors, who reserved a special room in the courtyard for them to train together. Deep down, he thinks that in reality they fear returning, since their injuries haven't fully healed yet. Dakang laughs, saying it sounds just like his son, and recalls that their town has already produced a few martial artists. Chen comments that he has watched Wade and the other two grow up since childhood, and always believed they would achieve something great. He also mentions that the village is preparing another sacrificial ceremony to the river god. The protagonist is surprised, asking about the ritual and recalling the custom, questioning whether it wasn't held just 3 months ago. Chen confirms, saying the river god manifested a divine sign the day before, demanding another sacrifice. Dakang adds that the deity leapt from the river and seized a giant bird in flames, even piercing the heavens. Liang realizes they are referring to the frog he saw and says he understands, promising to contribute money and participate when the time comes. Near the river, inside the lotus cave, something stirs. Shui appears on a stone and unleashes his ability. He dives into the water and the crocodile approaches with its mouth open. Liang dodges quickly and calculates. About 150 is what he can control, the amount of water he can compress into 10 liters, meaning each liter unleashes 15 kilograms of force. He advances using his technique while his beasts remain motionless. A rumble echoes and both return to their smaller forms. The protagonist concludes that his underwater strength has already surpassed the Pi Gate and that he could face 4 Lu Ting Kai without difficulty. Liang reviews his system stats and thinks that, regarding the water blade technique, all he lacks is a suitable weapon. He recalls that his third brother mentioned the existence of so-called spiritual weapons capable of self-regeneration and even evolving in rank. However, such weapons require heavenly materials and extremely rare earthly treasures to forge their cores. He wonders when he will be able to obtain one. Suddenly, he feels something burning. Shui looks to the side and questions what he found, buried among the rubble. Before him lies a shining feather. The protagonist concludes it likely fell from the giant bird and seems to hold special value. He wonders if this might be the same red feather from yesterday, for it appears to be extremely precious, and Liang considers whether it might be some kind of treasure. He thinks that later, by chance, he will go to his elder brother Gang's forge to choose a weapon and can ask him about it. In Pingyang County, Shui walks while reflecting, recalling the strength of the third brother lingering there, intrigued if it isn't near the county, and decides he will ask his elder brother about it later. At Min's forge, something is being prepared when the third brother greets him, saying he was already expecting his arrival. The protagonist steps closer carrying a sack and comments that he found something interesting while fishing that morning, coming specifically to ask about it. Gang examines it and asks if it's a crimson fire sprout, declaring it a true treasure. Liang, curious, questions if he really recognizes it, and the brother confirms immediately, saying it's an incredible find. It is a feather from the crimson firebird, a rare spirit creature. He explains that whenever the bird is at death's door, it injects all of its vital essence into one of its feathers, which then scatter in all directions to ensure its escape. Among them, one carries the greatest essence, called the golden feather of scarlet flame. With this feather, the bird is reborn, similar to a lizard shedding its tail, except in this case, it discards the entire body. Shui is impressed and asks if it is truly that powerful, wanting to know if this could be one of those golden feathers. Gang regrets to say it is not, clarifying that it is merely a residual crimson fire feather, though still of great value. The protagonist says he understands and asks what he should do with it. His brother replies that in his place, he would not only absorb the energy but also use it to forge a spiritual weapon, and asks if Liang has decided what kind he wants. He answers affirmatively, recalling that after the battle against the crab, he realized a pointed weapon would be most effective underwater, complementing the techniques he developed himself. He chooses a spear. Gang is surprised since it's rare for someone at the martial hall to pick that type of weapon. He explains that long weapons give range advantage but are difficult to control. Shui stands firm, saying he has made his decision and wants the feather incorporated into the spear, thinking that at last he will have his spiritual weapon. The elder brother assures him that as soon as it is ready, he will be notified to come collect it. The protagonist then asks about the long column of smoke outside, and Gang explains it comes from the Manhwa temple, where a great fire broke out that morning. Amid the flames, something appeared that should never have emerged. Liang asks what this forbidden thing might be, and Gang replies, the Demon Mountains. Elsewhere near the forest, someone runs desperately. It is a woman crying out for help. A little boy hears the screams. The woman, breathless, faints. Later, she begins to regain consciousness, and people around comment that she's about to wake. An elder watches, relieved, saying she has finally awakened. The woman rises, holding her head, and asks where she is. The old man replies that she is at the Manhwa temple and asks what happened to her. The woman explains that she is from Huaju County and 3 months ago went to visit relatives in Pingyang, but was ambushed by a group of mysterious bandits. Blindfolded, she was dragged to a dreadful place. When the blindfold was removed, she discovered a true hell, where people were tortured to be transformed into demons. The elder asks if it was a kidnapping for ransom, but the woman, frightened, denies it. She says the men claimed they were materials for refining pills. Terrifying monsters were there, and hooded people raised their hands before a creature. A young man took a dagger, pierced a man in front, and opened his palms to gather blood. A small mana orb was conjured. Aliang comments that it is truly strange and asks what exactly are those things that appear in the bellies. Lin responds that they are fetal pearl pills created by the Great Superior. She explains that these people ingest a broth made from the flesh of a mountain spirit, and regardless of gender, their bellies swell and conceive a mass of flesh. After 3 months, these masses turn into fetal pills, and several can be refined into a miscarriage pill, supposedly granting immortality. Aliang asks if they really take 3 months to form and what happens if they surpass that time. Lin responds that if not extracted within 3 months, they will hatch. Aliang asks what hatch means, and Lin only replies that he wouldn't want to know. Elsewhere, a voice instructs Zhiming, saying his brother went to the city to report to the authorities, and he must deliver vegetarian food to the young lady. The child replies that he understood and asks if she is there. He then approaches with the food, but a voice says the young lady is still asleep. The boy then notices something strange, steps on blood, and wonders what it is. A noise echoes and he sees someone hanging, covered in blood. Terrified, he looks closer and realizes it is the young lady herself. Beside her, on the bed, he finds the woman, already finished. The boy drops the food to the ground in panic as drops of blood begin to drip onto his head. He looks up and sees a terrifyingly hideous monster. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, a group walks together. They thank Xiao for offering to help with the investigation, since otherwise they would have to trouble the Lord to send someone. Xiao replies there is no need for such courtesy, as this is the duty of martial school warriors. Zheng explains that this time he must go to the Manhua temple, help cover some corpses, and remove certain things from there. Hui asks what things those might be, but Zheng answers that he doesn't need to know as he will understand when he sees. The bald monk says they are already arriving, that this is the Manhua temple, where he himself resides. They open the door and are shocked to see countless bodies scattered across the floor. The bald man's eyes widen as he calls for his master and runs to him, trying to save him. One of the young men comments that Zhao followed the monk and that it's best to observe first. Most of the corpses show bite marks, as if attacked by some giant insect, none of the bodies intact. Xiao wonders if these are the victims Zheng had mentioned. Another youth notices the bloodstains looking like drag marks, as if the bodies had been pulled away. The traces end there, where Xiao and the monk also are. Entering, they see the bald man kneeling, crying in despair. The young man asks what it is and what happened there, while Hui wonders if this is what Zheng wanted removed. Ahead, a massive egg rests, surrounded by corpses. The bald monk, in shock, just weeps, until a noise echoes from within. A young man challenges, asking who is there, and if they want to lose their life. But Xiao warns that the priority is not the door, but the fact that the egg is about to hatch. They ask what those things are, and Hui replies they are mountain demon eggs, a mark of the Ghost Mother sect. The youth asks if that sect isn't a remnant of the ancient dynasty. Xiao explains that when a mountain demon hatches and absorbs enough blood and flesh, it prepares for the second phase, and now that the nest is ready, the process is only accelerated. It becomes a creature with the strength of a wild stallion. The youth doesn't understand and asks what a wild stallion stage means, but there is no time. Something begins to emerge. With sharp claws and twisted forms, demons encouraged into the second phase crawl forth. At that instant, the bald monk kneeling keeps chanting Namo Amoeba non-stop. The monster charges swiftly and bites him. Xiao, alarmed, draws his sword, but his partner holds him back, saying to wait. The creature is terrifying, lunging at the two. One of the young men falls to the ground in panic, while Xiao screams for the instructor to save them. Xiao analyzes coldly. That creature is in the wild horse stage, not yet breaking barriers. He should retreat. He could use all his strength to smash the door, but if the monster escapes, it will be even worse. The demon continues charging the youths, and Hui thinks that in the end, survival is what matters. He has always lived that way, adapting. If he closes his eyes and avoids confronting it, as long as his father is safe, that is what counts. As the young men cry for help, Xiao unsheathes his sword. The monster turns, but Hui launches into the attack, declaring that today he will test the strength of a wild horse. In another scene, a boy lifts a wooden sword and declares that one day he will be a great hero like Yang Dong, renowned throughout the nation. The girl beside him admires him and says he is amazing, and the boy replies that this time he will go to the city with his father, for they will work at Master Chao's residence, and this is his chance. The girl assures him that he will succeed. Then Xue, still young, appears mocking, asking if he really thinks he can enter the martial school. He calls it a joke, saying that trash without a mother like him should rot in a corner with his sick father for the rest of his life. Elsewhere, a young Xiao coughs, wounded, as his father tends to his injuries, asking if he fought with someone from Master Jiao again. Hui replies that he was provoked and bullied first. His father advises him not to go too far when out in the world, that he must respect elders, be humble and willing to learn. Xiao answers that he understands. His father adds that no matter what happens, he must become someone he himself respects. Later, when Hui was accepted as Master Yang's disciple, Yang told him that those who enter his sect must keep an open mind, be humble and eager to learn, never arrogant over their achievements or scornful of others. In the present, Xiao charges the monster, recalling the master's words. Respect elders, never harm companions, never act against righteousness. Whoever joins his sect must defend justice and fight for what is right. Hui dodges the creature's strike and readies his counter, thinking that one must never commit evil or bully the weak. At the martial school, the image of Master Yang lingers vividly in his mind. Firm, fierce gaze, feet rooted to the ground, a long blade resting at his waist. Xiao blocks the attack, and that radiant blade cuts, spins, and gleams like gold and sapphire, tearing through darkness like sun rays piercing storm clouds, forcing the enemy to retreat. Wind and sand swirl, the sky darkens, and Master Yang, alone against monsters, fights while gravely wounded. In the present, Hui continues battling the beast. The monster clamps onto his arm, ripping it away brutally. Xiao grips his sword with the other hand, leaps atop the enemy, and delivers the final blow. Flames rise around them, and Hui declares that he cannot allow the creature to escape, that he has no choice but to sacrifice himself. He only managed to wound it so far, but he is thankful it is not yet a true galloping horse. The youth lying on the ground says it's fine, that they accomplished a good deed, and that Hui is a hero. Hui questions the meaning of being a hero. Xiao recalls Liang, saying there are many people far more heroic than he. He also remembers the master ordering him to break the children's teeth himself, or else his own would be broken. Before them, frightened, Xiao approached silently, apologizing in thought, but knowing he needed to do it to surpass himself and become stronger. Later, when the fire consumes the temple, people arrive and wonder what happened. They approach and see Hui braced on the blade impaled through the monster's chest, both burned. Shocked, they ask who that is standing upon the sword until they notice something on the ground. An elder retrieves an object marked with a symbol. Earlier, Xiao, still young, had given something to 2 children. They asked why he would help them, and Hui showed his broken teeth, answering that it's because he is a hero, and heroes never bully the weak. At the Jiao mansion, a thunderous voice calls someone useless. It is Master Jiao scolding his subordinate for acting on his own and asking if he has any idea how great a problem it would be if what happened at the Manhua temple were revealed. Zheng tries to justify himself, saying he made a quick decision as the situation demanded. That day, upon discovering that the woman had escaped, they chased her immediately. But who would have imagined she would run straight to the temple? When they caught up, the place was already drenched in blood, and the only option left was to let Xiao head to the authorities, while at the same time dealing with the mountain demon that had emerged. As soon as he entered the scripture repository, they locked the doors behind him and set fire to it to destroy all evidence. Master Jiao, irritated, yanked his ear and asked what use fire was, since turning everything to ash takes at least 3 days and 3 nights, and whether he had that much time, until a voice intervened, declaring enough, calling them all idiots responsible for the mess. He accused them of failing to deal with the woman as they should, now bringing a stone into their path. He added that to the Supreme Mother, their actions lacked sincerity, and lack of sincerity must be punished. He then crushed the head of one of the hooded men and declared that it was the Supreme Mother's will. Master Jiao was stunned. The terrifying man concluded by saying Jiao had made great contributions to the sect and would be blessed by the Supreme Mother, but he should not forget they were all in the same boat. Jiao promptly replied yes, that he could rest assured, that he would clean up the mess. The superior then asked about the steward, whether he truly intended to throw his own son away. Zheng, kneeling, promised it would never happen again. The superior withdrew, saying he would leave the matter in their hands. Watching him leave, the master sighed. Zheng muttered that the man now threatened them openly without restraint. Jiao retorted, asking what they could do, that if not for his family's wealth and influence, he would never tolerate that wretched old man. But he admitted the man was at least clever to continue with the plan, letting the woman's belly nourish the mountain demon and massacring everyone in the temple to feed it. Otherwise, it would be hard to find another chance like that. And now that everything was moving forward, they needed a way to cover it up, for the tribunal was already stirring. Once the Manhua temple matter is resolved, they will flee to Huang, where they have a foundation and can still live as immortals. The Taiju Dan can also continue there without the nuisance of Yang interfering in their affairs. If they don't want to be purged by Dashun, they must minimize the damage. That is the safest way. At Yixing's marketplace, at the entrance of the village, the protagonist walks, thinking he never expected Xiao to end up like this. According to Libo, he was one of the few who defended justice that day, and seemed like a decent person. Hui tells Lu to stop, and Liang asks why he is at the Manhua temple, saying that according to his elder brother, the martial school never received any request from the authorities that day. He thinks about the mountain demon, about how this world is truly cruel, and hopes that monster has already been dealt with. A voice asks if that isn't Wade. Qing says he has returned, and Shui asks what is going on. Jiang replies that he should go see for himself because a large crowd has gathered at his door. The protagonist is confused. On top of the rocks, the demon is watching, saying Liang's name over and over. It is often said that the past of great people is full of suffering and pain, and the greater the suffering, the greater the greatness. A voice says that he is completely broken, that this is the worst suffering. It is Quan. Dingy tells his father that enough is enough, that he has been lying there for half an hour, that the fisherman doesn't need to go that far. The boy keeps getting beaten, and the father says he is an unfilial son, asking how someone charismatic like him could end up with such a foolish child. Dingy shouts for him to stop hitting or he will kill him. Quan replies that he will beat him until the end. The man keeps hitting his own son, and there are people hiding behind the door. The woman says that boy really thought that joining the martial school would change something in him, asks what happened, and states that it is exactly as she predicted, that he caused trouble and now they have come knocking. The old man asks when she said that. Liang's aunt replies that they never lent him grains before and asks if he still came to see her. Guan calls her ignorant, says she doesn't understand anything, and asks if she thinks she can recover the grains she lent, telling her to just look at his father who lived so little. The aunt asks him not to be so angry. The old man orders them to stop talking, saying that Brat has returned. The protagonist approaches and asks what they are doing at his door. Ding calls him a scoundrel, and Quan thinks he is a handsome young man, saying he must be the nephew. He states that he is truly exceptional, straight as a thorn in the wind, dignified and balanced, and that it's no wonder he became the master's personal disciple. The people are surprised to hear Young's name and ask if he became a personal disciple, saying that it means he truly bowed and recognized him as master, half son and half father, and that Wade entered the Yang Martial School where even the county magistrate must show respect to the old master. The people ask if even the county magistrate needs to greet him. They say they always knew that boy was destined for greatness and ask how old he is now, if it isn't already time to talk about marriage, commenting on his fair and beautiful skin. Quan says he is ashamed of his son and never imagined he would commit such a vile and shameful act, and that if the nephew wants to beat him to the end right there, he won't stop him. Liang asks if he can do whatever he wants and says he is not one to hold grudges, but that a man cannot live long if he keeps resentment inside, asking who does not wish to live a long life. Dingy begs, says he truly recognizes his mistake, that from now on he will be a servant, his horse, but pleads to be spared this time and swears he will not do it again. Shui throws the piece of wood he was holding to the ground and says to forget it, leave it behind because he has already suffered enough. After all, he was not the mentor. Dingy gives thanks in his thoughts. A voice tells him to wait, and Ding wonders if he really is that father's son and if he really needs to be beaten today. Quan says he is generous but cannot be ungrateful. Shi takes 2,000 wen. Guan opens the door and says this is the dear nephew, the true uncle, the closest relative, and that regarding compensation they can discuss it with him. The people nearby tell him to be ashamed, asking if when Wade was starving he opened his doors to help him, and now suddenly he claims to be the dearest uncle. Guan asks what everyone knows and if he doesn't recognize who the real uncle is, saying that without him he would not be where he is today. Quan asks the boy who that man is, and the protagonist replies that he doesn't know him. In the benefactor's memory, that so-called uncle was never a dear relative, just a parasite who always took advantage of others. And even when the benefactor was starving, he never offered a single grain of food. Liang says that if he insists on doing something, in a few days there will be the River Gods Festival, and besides the quotas paid by wealthy families, each healthy man must contribute 100 copper coins. Since his master is so kind, he asks why not help cover that amount for the villagers so they can save up and celebrate the new year properly. And taking advantage of the moment, he says he will also set up a porridge stall for a few days because many beggars have been passing through the village. The people comment that nephew Liang is fair and thank him, calling him a good boy. Shui closes the door, relieved that it is finally over, and thinks that last time at the martial school, he practiced skin refinement and felt his body reach its limit. His skin was no longer stretched as before, but seemed swollen, and if he's not mistaken, he should be able to break through the skin gate today. The protagonist prepares water and thinks that the final breakthrough will generate much more heat than before, and that a single wrong step could fry his brain. To prevent this, he must use the method of physical cooling. Liang enters the water, releases his energy, and thinks that the breakthrough begins now. Then, Shui remains inside the tub, smoke dissipating around his body until a light emerges. The protagonist opens his eyes and says he has finally broken through the skin barrier, calculating that now he can control about 250 kilos of water, a significant increase compared to before. But he notices that the fusion with the system has not improved. He leaves the tub, dresses, and reflects that he never expected breaking the skin barrier to have such a great effect. He wonders if, by surpassing the 4 barriers, he might be able to control tons. He thinks that his 2 abilities complement each other, achieving twice the results with half the effort, and that there is nothing more satisfying than that. He decides it is time to go out for a walk. Liang opens the door and hits Guan in the face, knocking him to the ground. Jitian says he is not his dear nephew. Shui asks what happened and if he was looking for him. Guan, holding a sack, replies that he was worried he might be hungry and could not sleep in peace, so he emptied the pantry and brought rice. The protagonist replies for him to take it and eat it himself because he no longer lacks food and thinks that in this world, rice is a valuable food. Jitian holds the door and asks him to wait. Liang opens it again, hitting his face once more and knocking him to the ground. Guan asks what he is trying to do, saying he is his blood uncle, the only uncle, and that the house should be his. He claims that a man offered a large sum of money and he did not accept, asking if Liang is crazy and saying he should use that money to support his cousin because elders are like parents, and he could be like a half-father to him. Shui feels a killing intent and replies that if he wants to lose his life, he can try. Getian thinks that in just a few minutes, he has already changed so much, wonders if he has always been so tall, and shouts, calling everyone to see that ungrateful brat who upon becoming a martial master, ceased to be human, who does not acknowledge his poor family, and that he is the true river while Zhao Lu is the first by blood. A woman throws water in his face and asks if he dares call himself an uncle, if when the boy's father died he helped carry the coffin, if when he had nothing to eat he ever lent anything. Another woman reminds them that when they divided the inheritance, if not for his tricks, would the boy's father have received only one boat, being forced to raise his son alone to survive. Guan asks where those hags came from, and if they think they have the right to speak, threatening to slap them until someone strikes him and tells him to try, saying he will be the first. It is Zhao Wan, the chief, who reprimands him, saying that now that the boy is doing well, he appears seeking benefits, asking if he is an animal or just pretending, because even animals are not so despicable. He orders him to leave and never show up again. Jitian runs away. Not just anyone dares face the village chief. Even the old master Zhao must show him respect. The protagonist thanks him for the help and asks why he came looking for him. Zhao Wan replies that he came to ask him to be the master of ceremonies for the next river festival, something like the high priest who leads the ritual. Perhaps a good opportunity. He says that on that day, Liang will be able to discover what it is for. The protagonist accepts without problem, and the village chief warns that in the coming days he must memorize the ritual texts. The next day, at dawn, the birds sing. Shui yawns and thinks that since he still does not know the characters of this world very well, according to what the master said, he also needs to memorize the ritual text, so he has no other choice. He tells himself that he reincarnated and is now just a student in ancient times. In the morning, inside the academy, the protagonist thinks that diligence throughout life brings comfort, honor, and wealth, and that one should look at the humble, for they remain incompetent by nature. They only said he had to go to school, but no one told him it would be elementary. The children comment that he doesn't open his mouth. The teacher lowers the book and tells him not to be arrogant, that the academy allowing a brute like him to enroll is already a favor from the master, and that he should be grateful to have such a distinguished teacher, considering how little he knows. Liang replies that one must understand the will of the ruler and serve the officials, respect authority, and act with caution. For diligence throughout life brings comfort, honor, and wealth, and that one should look at the humble, for they remain incompetent by nature. He states that the teachings are complete and cover all subjects: insects, plants, weapons, armor, beasts, fierce tigers, and all kinds of strange things. He says he has already memorized everything, thinking that as one of the best university students in his past life, memorizing that is nothing. He just finds the method of learning characters very inefficient. The teacher calls him an insolent brat and says those are sacred teachings, passed down through generations, and that what he understands is nonsense. He claims it is not contempt, but asks how a brute like him could invent something. Shui replies that the Academy's Fankai method is effective but extremely complex and requires prior knowledge of the characters, whereas the method he developed turns characters into symbols, each symbol representing a specific pronunciation, and he calls this system pinyin. A voice comments that it is similar to Fanki but much simpler. It is Si Hung Yi who asked to hear more about the phonetic symbol system he mentioned. The children say that he is a professor from the capital of the Great Dynasty. The teacher bows before him. Then, still in the same place, Sai says it is interesting. The teacher insists that it is nonsense and blasphemy, that may the sages forgive him, but such heresy will not enter his ears. Hung Yi explains that in the Great Dynasty, there is a reward system for inventions, and that if someone creates something useful, they can receive money prizes, tax exemptions, or even a noble title. The protagonist thinks that this is it. Sooner or later, people will notice his uniqueness, and the only way to avoid suspicion is to stand out in his own way. Sai states that he is exceptionally talented and asks why he doesn't study with him from now on, saying there is no distinction of status between scholars and warriors as that is what his teacher taught him. Jiang protests, saying that is outrageous, but Heng Yi assures him not to worry, because the things his students cannot question, he will question, and the things they cannot tear down, he will tear down. Liang bids farewell to the teacher. Elsewhere, underwater, the crocodile and the crab notice a ball that fell into the river. The catfish also approaches, getting close to the ball until the crab is attacked. The catfish grabs the ball and quickly flees. Further ahead, something shines. On the riverbed at night, the protagonist swims and the crocodile seems excited. Liang says he knows that victory is his, and asks if that was the tunnel he dug. The crocodile smiles and Shui praises him, saying it is incredible. He thinks that space is larger than he expected and wonders if the light comes from that vine since there seems to be more space above. The texture is soft. The protagonist tries to bite it but cannot. He keeps swimming and wonders if it is not water inside and if all those vines extend from there. Suddenly, something emerges behind him and leaps at him, but Liang manages to dodge and says it is too slow, that he had already seen it before. He wonders if that is a water centipede. The creature leaps again to attack him, but the crab steps in and blocks the blow. Shui comments that it seems his fist has grown quite a bit. The centipede turns and the crab manages to hold it. The protagonist praises it, saying it was a good job, remembering that the bite of a water centipede is terrifying. But more importantly, they possess a weapon feared by martial artists, venom. If he can control it, it will basically be a hidden weapon, besides still having space for another spiritual connection. Liang takes a stone and makes a cut on his finger, thinking that his body, after breaking through the barrier, has become incredibly strong. He thinks he will need to ask his elder brother about buying a dagger. Shui brings his finger close, blood dripping, and touches the centipede. The pressure increases, and the protagonist wonders if that thing is as strong as a crocodile. Later, still in the same place, Liang manages to secure the connection and says that the centipede is so fierce he will call it Ah Wei. The system notifies information about it, and Shui is surprised by the value of 10,000. Thinking that each new tamed beast gets more expensive, he wonders where it might have eaten that water spirit mushroom. They walk into a dark place, which the protagonist finds frightening. Inside, they notice someone. It is a skeleton holding something in its hand. On the ground beside it is written that a former Navy general of Great Qian, after defeat and gravely wounded, came there, ashamed to face the Majesty's grace, and ended his life in that place. Sometime later, Liang stands before the skeleton and thinks it is great that Qian, the vanguard, ended his own life. He says he cannot read the rest of the characters. It doesn't seem like he simply wandered in, so he wonders if there might be an ancient battlefield nearby, and if perhaps spiritual weapons or something else remain. He recognizes that the box must have been the one that held the water spirit mushroom and apologizes for the offense. He assumes the other one was the one he ate. He decides to take the remains and bury them beneath a field of spiritual lotuses as a proper burial. It is time to level up. This time, he needs to surpass 50. He gives Stubby 1/6, Chonky and Fist receive 12 portions each, and Zeno has already eaten a whole one. He asks what else they want. Shui says the rest is his. Then the protagonist eats, finding the taste soft and smooth like tofu, refreshing. The system notifies that water essence increased by 216 points, higher than crab roe. He thinks that if he uses everything to improve, he will be able to advance. Liang clicks the system and more notifications appear. The fusion with the water monkey swamp spirit is already halfway complete and a new innate ability has been unlocked. He releases power around his body until something begins to shine toward his chest, growing in intensity. Still before the skeleton, Shui says it is time to test the new ability in the water. The protagonist leaps toward the river but ends up hitting his face on the rocks. He says it seems like a movement skill, but it requires stamina and is difficult to control the direction. As for the previous aquatic ability, if it is real, it is absolutely insane. This time, his water control ability increased by another 150 kilos, reaching 400 kilos, a significant leap. As for the creatures, each grew between 200 and 500 points. He wonders when the catfish surpassed the others since it makes no sense, but it probably had its own fortuitous encounter, perhaps even its own system. Shui begins to laugh and says that in a week it will be the River Festival, and that he can use this time to study a lot with the master. He feels a premonition that it must be related to the River Festival. More notifications arrive. The water leap, with Uncle's favor, can evolve into a divine skill, passed down from an aquatic mile. A week later, at the beginning of winter, Libo knocks at the door and says it is time to go to the River Festival. Meanwhile, inside, the protagonist tells the centipede to climb up. The creature climbs onto his arm and coils like a bracelet. Then Liang opens the door and says they should go to the festival. At the festival, people are gathered. A child is alone, crying. The mother approaches and asks what happened, why she is crying. The little girl points her finger and replies that there is a monster in the alley. The mother tells her to stop making things up and crying, promising to buy her sweets. Beside them, hidden, there is a monster with an overwhelming and terrifying energy, repeating Liang's name. 3 men beat the drum, animal heads are on trays being carried, and a voice tells the shaman to resume his position. And for the priest to proceed, Shui climbs the stairs and stands before the table with the animal heads. The masked young man says, "The ritual shall begin." The protagonist opens the scroll and begins to read. River god above, borrow the land of Yixing City, dwell near the waters of the Jianghuai rivers entrusted by the people, carrying their hopes and leading them in reverence before the power, presenting this offering. His friends are also down there watching, and Li says he looks so majestic. Li thinks he doesn't know what happened to him, but remembers they grew up together and wonders if he's still really the same Wade. Meanwhile, the demon climbs onto the roof and begins watching him from a distance. The protagonist immediately realizes it's the mountain ghost mentioned by his older brother. That cracked skin, resembling tree bark, was identical to the illustrations in the annotated version of Hao Mutung's notes about the haters. The child, upon seeing the creature, screams for her mother, saying the monster has returned. Everyone looks frightened at the beast, and suddenly the demon charges toward the people. Civilians run and scream desperately, while the girl becomes separated from her mother, who searches for her amid the crowd. The monster passes by the child, notices her nearby, and turns toward her. Liang watches and thinks there will be no way to stop it, but Shui runs in that direction, worried. The mother screams for her daughter until Chung manages to grab the child and falls to the ground, holding her in his arms, just as the monster charges at them. Libo rushes over and comments that he hasn't been anxious in recent days. Li launches an attack, telling it to taste the flying dagger technique he had learned, but the demon notices and dodges easily. Libo thinks that since it dodged, he won't make it in time. The monster opens its mouth horrendously and raises its sharp claws about to strike. Jie yells to Wade, asking that if he has any trick, he should use it now. At that moment, a skill activates, blocking the creature's touch. It's the protagonist who approaches and strikes the beast, pinning it to the ground and declaring he made it in time. Even so, the monster insists on pressing forward. Liang thinks it's already too late, but notices the abundant water from the lake used in the ritual, and remembers that the water-stepping skill requires that medium. Realizing Shui created the necessary condition himself, he then places his hand over the water and activates his technique, making the current turn against the enemy. Chung watches in surprise and asks how he managed that. The protagonist orders him to take the girl away and leave the rest to him. Ji agrees and promises to return soon to help, withdrawing with the child. Liang still wonders why all of that was happening, but Shui notices too late the momentary disappearance and realizes the demon approaching from behind. He turns quickly, crosses his arms, and blocks the attack, thinking about the immense force of the blow. The monster strikes repeatedly, but Shui manages to dodge and thinks this is the right chance. He begins striking non-stop, and at that moment his allies come running back to help him. The protagonist ends up injured and understands he must immobilize first, instructing his companions to target the joints instead of random cuts. The two obey and hit the enemy, which lets out a roar. Liang taunts, asking if the creature really thinks it can be defeated like that, since it wouldn't be enough. Shui strikes it and throws it far away, then summons his centipede, which bites the beast's neck. He thinks that Zeno's poison is no joke, and that this was going to hurt. People hiding watch, and upon noticing them, the monster tries to reach them. Liang reacts by throwing a sharp wooden stake, piercing the creature's body. Shui then steps in and drives the stake deeper. The protagonist asks if it's over, but the creature lying on the ground still utters mortal assent and mentions Liang's name. The hidden villagers murmur fearfully, wondering what that means and if the river god is punishing them. Chung remarks that the villagers are losing faith, and Libo adds that if this continues, no one will live in peace. Shui denies it and says this was a gift, a blessing for Yixing village. He raises his dagger, decapitates the monster, and declares this was the perfect offering to the river god. The system notifies that the Huai River sacrifice has been completed and that experience has increased. At the ritual the next morning, at the start of winter in Yixing village, the villagers gather around the defeated body. Liang reflects that to defeat that mountain ghost, first it was necessary to break through the skin barrier at the right time. Second, the synchronization rate rose and his physical strength now far surpassed that of a common martial artist with a skin barrier. And third, the deadly poison made all the difference. Without it, the situation could have been disastrous. Most important, however, was the favor gained from River, which could strengthen his innate ability, even if the benefit was minimal. The village chief announces that the doctor has arrived. Shui shows his wound and the doctor observes, saying his body was powerful, with arms strong like a monkey's and a waist slim like a wasp's. The protagonist thanks him and asks to examine the wound. The doctor then asks what materials were used for the cloak and tunic he wore. Liang answers that the cloak was a gift from his older brother, made of bear dog hide, tough as steel, and that the tunic was from his 8th older brother, woven with celestial silkworm silk. The doctor observes that even so, it wouldn't be enough given the depth of the wound, and asks if he had broken the skin barrier. Everyone is surprised and asks about it until Shui confirms, and the civilians comment that he brought honor to the village and would bring glory to the ancestors. Libo declares that Wade is now a true martial artist and in just a few months. Chung thinks he still can't catch up to him, while Guan reflects that the boy has become too strong and wonders if he might come settle accounts with him. The village chief, worried, asks what kind of monster that was. The protagonist explains it was a mountain ghost, a creature that feeds on blood and was probably attracted by the crowd's accumulated concentration. He couldn't say if there were others lurking near Yixing, but if 3 appeared at once, something was wrong. The people, frightened, ask about this wrongness. An elder comments that the creature's head looked familiar, resembling Lai Tu Zhang, and wonders what might have happened to him. Liang reflects on Lai Tu Zhang, thinks about alchemy, the mountain ghost tied to the Jiao estate, the Lai Tu Zhang clan, and the Fahua temple. He concludes he should have noticed earlier since alchemy may be real, but creating mountain ghosts was the real business behind it. He decides he must go to Pingyang to report everything to the master, suspecting that monster was indeed Lai Tu Zhang, and that answers would be demanded at any cost. Elsewhere, Xu asks what brings Jiao there today since he rarely appeared. The protagonist greets her and explains he came to report something important to the master. Later, in the same place, Liang states he believes the incidents involving mountain ghosts are connected to the Jiao estate. Shi remarks he remains as smart as ever, calling him Little Nine, and says it's no wonder the master thought so highly of him. Shui replies that it seems she already knew. Xu admits she knew he would get anxious, reminding him not to forget who his master was. None other than Yang, the only one of Pingyang, belonging to the tiger hunting realm, fortress of the Ghost Mother sect. Hooded figures climb the stairs, frightening everyone, who ask what is happening, saying they are under attack and calling for the alarm to be sounded. Something bright appears in the middle of a smoke whirlwind and Dong appears, declaring he is there personally and ordering them to surrender. At night, somewhere else, someone punches the wood. It was the protagonist training, 2 days already in the master's house. The lady had asked him to stay in the martial hall so as not to interfere with the master's plans, and even gave him a silver bar worth 2,000 wen for daily expenses at the estate, instructing him to inform her if it wasn't enough. Thanks to the flesh-preparing pill, his wounds had recovered significantly. Liang thinks about the master and the lady, suspecting the Ghost Mother cult was planning large-scale attacks on martial artists in the hall to refine pills, which is why they kept him there for safety. Suddenly, something approaches him, but Shui dodges quickly, and the sphere hits the wall, causing cracks. The protagonist demands to know who is there, and Huchi appears, saying his vigilance wasn't bad. He reveals he had learned of his presence upon returning and guessed he would be there. Liang asks if he returned that day, and the instructor answers it was just minor matters. He then recalls he used a spear and challenges him to a few training rounds while they talk. Shui warns he won't hold back and expects clarity. Huchi throws the object at him again, and the protagonist manages to defend against all of the attacks. They exchange intense blows until the instructor sees an opening and tries to hit him, but Liang blocks, though his spear ends up falling from his hand. He then uses the opponent's weapon to leap and closes his fist, charging at him. Soon after, the object rolls on the ground and Shui falls as well. Huchi comments that it seemed he had already broken the skin barrier, judging by his speed, and concludes he really was someone with a destiny pattern. Liang asks what that was. The instructor replies that, in any case, the day of the destiny pattern was approaching, and the master would explain when the time came. Huchi extends his hand to help him up and invites him for another round. Shui accepts, stands, and agrees to continue. The two resume training, and the instructor keeps encouraging him, advising him never to underestimate his strength and to keep advancing. Afterward, the protagonist is seated, breathing heavily, and Huchi asks him about what he had said regarding the Jiao estate, whether it matched the investigations he had been conducting over the past few days, since something seemed very deliberate. Liang repeats in doubt, "Very deliberate?" And the instructor confirms, saying it was as if someone had left a trail on purpose. Maybe he was just being overly cautious, but he couldn't ignore it. Then he hands him a book, saying that now that he had just advanced past the skin stage, this manual would be perfect. It was called the Bow Force Method, suitable for a martial artist newly advanced in that stage. He explains that martial techniques are divided into 2 major categories: movements and force techniques. Force techniques were methods to channel and circulate qi and blood, requiring deeper control, and only artists who reached a certain level of cultivation could use them. It was a way to harness the strength and chi of the whole body for one's benefit, and he advises him to read carefully and then use the method to spar with him in training. Shui thanks him and asks the reason he had sought him out. Huchi smiles and replies that he had almost forgotten. Elder brother Lu had sent him to inform him that his spiritual weapon was ready. Elsewhere, a huge chained monster thrashed about while hooded youths hurried civilians along. Yang watches two girls pass by and sighs, remembering his daughter of the same age. One of the hooded men rebukes him, saying that Lord Wu was waiting for him. In the room where the monster was kept captive, another hooded figure announces that all the pill's ingredients were ready, and that in 3 days they could feed that rare creature. He emphasizes that it was a valuable mutant and should be well cared for, as it would be a crucial ingredient. In another room, civilians of all ages were confined, some coughing, among them an elderly man lying down calling for a youth. Spiritual weapons possess spirit, and where there is spirit, there is also a nature. Those of fiery temperament wield explosive arms, while those of calm temperament handle soothing arms. Elsewhere, metal was heated in the fire. It was gang forging. The first stage consisted of softening the tungsten steel, refining its essence, and increasing its resilience. The second stage was to activate the latent energy in the core of a feather so that it would be absorbed by the steel. Gang throws something into the flames and explains it was the skin of a shadow bat, a creature oscillating between illusion and existence, able to glide through darkness and feed on blood, serving as the mold base for the spear. He urges his younger brother to continue the process. The protagonist steps forward, cuts his own hand with the dagger, and infuses his blood into the fire, since a spiritual weapon required its wielder's blood to complete the fusion with the stir spirit. As soon as the blood is cast, the flames intensify. Gang places the spear into the fire and wonders if the weapon's spirit was rejecting the blood, perhaps still unstable at the finish. With effort, he persists until the weapon finally completes, then hands it to Shui, asking him to try it. The protagonist observes his spiritual weapon and comments that it was heavy, at least 54 kilos. He drives the spear into the ground, makes a movement, and feels an immediate bond, as if sharing blood and breath with the weapon. The smith suggests testing it on the wooden stakes in the back courtyard. Liang goes there and begins training. Gang notes the form was great, but reminds him he still hadn't given the weapon a name. Shui replies that he will call it Fubo. At that moment, someone approaches saying his weapon seemed ready. It was Huchi, accompanied by Shu. The protagonist asks what brought them there, and the instructor replies that he had come on the master's orders to investigate personally and asks what he had done. Z laughs and comments that taverns and opera houses were excellent places to gather information. Gang asks if they had managed to get anything useful, and Shu confirms that he had overheard something, maybe even found one of the ghost mother's hideouts. He says he had just been admiring flowers when he saw men in black hoods passing by, and thinks to himself that he doesn't understand how they could wear dark clothes in broad daylight, drawing so much attention. The girls tease him, saying he would be drinking afterward. Shu explains that he simply followed them, simple as pie, and that he discovered a hideout very close to the Manhua temple, thus fulfilling his mission. Gang is surprised to hear it was near the temple and says that means they could advance with the task the master had given. Z comments that, given the situation, a direct attack would be most appropriate. The smith agrees and declares that the next day they would strike and destroy the hideout. Huchi says understood, and Shu adds that this time the younger brother would go along, for it was already time to have blood on his hands. He couldn't avoid it forever, not with all the enemies the master had drawn. Gang knocks him on the head and scolds him, telling him not to listen to such nonsense, then asks the protagonist's opinion. Shui replies that he understands and confirms that he will go with them the next day. Inside the Ghost Mother cult's hideout, the terrifying monster remained chained. One of the hooded men leads the way and comments that the tiger was fine, strong as ever, and feeding well. Jung orders that they not disturb him or his son. The young man nods in agreement, and Jung adds that his son had tried so hard, but if he hadn't turned into that thing. The old man places his hand on the creature's face and asks in what other way he could help his own father achieve immortality. On the hill, already at the start of a winter night near the Manhua temple, children walk as one of the hooded men carries materials for elixirs, saying, "Today's batch brought true treasures." The leader calls him a useless pig, asking if he couldn't even hold his pants up. The young man laughs and asks for a moment from the chief, but he replies for him to come closer, warning that if he ruined Envoy Huang's plans, he'd be finished. Hidden with his older brothers and accompanied by a dog, the protagonist observes and declares that this must be the place Shu had mentioned. Thankfully, the master had dressed them in black, for without the sharp beacon, they wouldn't have noticed the subtle markers left by the fourth brother. The dog starts barking, but Gang approaches, signals to silence it, and Liang asks where the elder brother had gone. At that moment, Z aims and fires an arrow. Meanwhile, a hooded man tried to take advantage of a defenseless woman, but is struck by the arrow and thrown far. The others notice and shout that they were under attack, ordering immediate response. Huchi recognizes it as Zhu's signal, and Gang charges ahead, shouting for them to advance. The smith charges with great force, and when the smoke clears, the hooded men are already in battle stance, weapons in hand. The protagonist, upon seeing, asks if that was the strength of warriors from the galloping horse realm. The instructor responds not to freeze, for it was their turn. Liang agrees, saying he understood. Gang charges at the enemies. Two try to strike him from behind, but are felled by Z's arrows from the rooftop. Shu keeps firing while Huchi and Shui engage in direct combat. One of the men comments that spears were not suitable for narrow places and orders them to surround the boy. However, the protagonist spins his spear in a single motion, felling several foes at once. Gang orders him to seize the black prey, find the hostages, and get them out of there. In the underground passage, the cultists run, shouting that there were intruders and calling for reinforcements. Yang sighs in relief, saying it was finally over and there would be no more torment. His teammate, frightened, orders him to run for they were being invaded. Lin holds his head in despair, saying he had destroyed everything when he blew up that woman, that even children the age of his daughter were there, and that he could no longer bear the weight of guilt. He declares that everyone was guilty, that sinners could not escape punishment, leaving his companion confused at what he meant. Then Yang strikes him and accuses that all of it was Jiao and Zheng's doing. Zheng was still on site, saying that if just 4 disciples under Yang's command had caused that, they needed to release all the mountain ghosts kept imprisoned and spread them across the hill. The men obey promptly. Zheng grits his teeth, convinced it was a trap by Jiao, and complains that among all, only he had been sent into such a mess. Still, he considered it a golden opportunity, for if he could escape through the secret tunnel, he might turn the tables. By winter dawn, at the passage of the bandits' fortress, Z declares that scum like that deserved crueler endings, and Gang asks about the younger brother. Huchi replies that he was probably escorting the hostages down the mountain, and Shu concludes they would finish things there, for judging by the time, he would soon be back. Gang comments that what worried him was the blood in the air, so dense it seemed something was lurking. The enemies lay fallen across the ground, but the air remained heavy. On the other side, the protagonist walked with the dog at his side, reflecting whether there could be more prisoners hidden and if that tunnel ahead would be a hideout. Liang notices the dog reacting even more and wonders if someone was nearby. Shui cautiously opens the door, but it closes by itself right after, revealing ahead only a dense darkness. The system notifies about mountain sweep, demon hunt activated, current progress none, and that it must be completed to gain the favor of the river's sovereign lord, doubling martial potential in each realm and granting 10% more damage against aquatic beasts. The protagonist wonders about the river's sovereign lord and this system quest, trying to understand if it was truly a challenge imposed. The dog growls and soon several monsters appear surrounding him. Liang plants his spear into the ground and declares that now he understood. He would not leave without defeating them all. He states that enough hesitation, he would begin. Thanks to Zed, his body had strengthened quickly, and the last days of training had refined his techniques. Shui charges forward and slays one monster, saying there was no more time to hold back. He hurls the spear, striking another, and with each enemy defeated, the quest progress rises. In no time, he eliminates 6. Liang comments that this was now the second round. Small monsters rush together, but before they get too close, the protagonist throws the spear through their bodies. He retrieves the weapon and with a single strike, cuts down 2 more, continuing until none remain. Panting, he asks if it was over, but Zheng appears and questions if it was truly him. Shui senses another presence, and Jiang arrives mocking, saying he never imagined the filthy orphan fisherman would come this far. Zheng declares it the perfect moment, and Xiang holds an elder, presenting him as Lu Zhongsan, his disciple's father, and sneers that his son had come to save him. The protagonist recognizes the man and declares his elder brothers were nearby, and for him that day was over. Xiang smiles and retorts if it was really over, until a giant terrifying monster emerges, making Liang wonder what it was. Zheng provokes him, saying to see who would defeat whom. At winter dawn in another ghost mother cult base, the 3 elder brothers cross the forest. Z comments whether they were tense for no reason, but Huchi replies no, since the mountain ghosts faced so far barely reached the skin-breaking stage. Gang adds those were no threat to Little Nine. The problem would be a greater ghost, since such creatures possess the strength of the galloping horse realm. The protagonist realizes he faced the most dangerous situation since rebirth. That massive body, arms like trunks, undoubtedly reached a force close to galloping horse realm. He wonders if he should surrender, but recalls he had fought too hard for this life and danger was simply part of it. If even a miserable childhood had not defeated him, Why should this scare him? The monster unleashes brutal strikes, but Shui manages to dodge until he is hit, resisting as he braces on his spear. The creature tries to crush him with a punch, but Liang leaps aside and avoids the blow. Zheng watches, impressed, questioning if that brat had really been in the martial hall for only half a year. Xiang incites the creature, calling it son and ordering it to kill the boy. Shui charges and attacks with his spear, but the monster counters with colossal force, hurling him against the rocks. Zheng laughs and asks if he really believed he was in a position to settle scores with his mother. Fallen, Liang thinks the difference in physical power was overwhelming. At that moment, the system notifies he received the grace of the River Sovereign Lord, able to fuse with a portion of the grace of the River Lord Emperor, reaching the first realm of Martial Father Apotheosis. His martial talent doubles, and he gains 10% additional damage against aquatic beasts. Coughing, Shui reflects if that was luck, and concludes luck was also part of strength. Suddenly, the environment changes and he finds himself in a dark place, not understanding where he was. Glowing eyes approach, and he realizes he cannot move his body. A dragon appears and asks if he would not show respect for the face. Beside him, a warrior observes and declares that violating heavenly laws leads only to death, and obedience is the only path to survival. Confused, Liang wonders if that was the River Lord who had entered his body. The dragon opens its mouth, releasing a crushing pressure, and the warrior announces the technique witnessed was called Dragon Slash. Back in real time, Zheng mocks that the boy dared bother him with such weak skills, and asks what he had done wrong since he only ever sought to survive. He claims others were born with patrons and good fortune while all he had was his son, begging for a path forward. He recalls how long he fought just for the steward's post, calls Jiao a blind fool, and challenges what they truly understood before ordering to kill him. The monster charges at the youth, but Shui unleashes a terrifying energy from his eyes, causing a blast and releasing crushing pressure. Xiang is startled and asks what it was. The smoke clears, revealing the protagonist rising stronger and more powerful. At Winter Dawn, Liang recalls asking Master Yang how powerful the transcendence of the Rainbow Forge and Rainbow Master realms were. The master had answered that no one had ever truly seen them, so no one knew for certain, but there was a title that summarized them well. In the present, Shui rises with a devastating aura. He raises a finger, unleashes mana, and activates his dragon-cutting skill. An overwhelming darkness spreads across the place, and Zheng asks horrified what it was. The fallen elder watches terrified while Xiang orders his son to kill the boy. The monster charges again, but the protagonist faces it with his spear. The beast clenches its fist. Zheng laughs, saying it was expected only to be stunned as Xiang's expression changes, seeing his son's arm vanish. Desperate, he asks what was happening. The creature roars, its body weakens and fades until disappearing completely. Zheng kneels, defeated, murmuring that now nothing remained. Liang collapses unconscious to the ground. Xiang, consumed by hatred, grabs a stone and blames the protagonist, trying to kill him. But an explosion interrupts and Zheng realizes someone was approaching. It was Gang, warning there was an undiscovered hidden chamber there. Huchi approaches and asks if the one fallen was the younger brother. Gang questions what had happened, and Zhu comments it seemed there had been a serious battle. Zheng, hidden, realizes it was his only chance to escape and turn the situation. The brothers decide to take the younger one to safety first and then search the place, and Xiang believes it his opportunity. Zheng walks silently, but Lin appears before him and recognizes him, demanding to know where his wife and daughter were. Xiang feigns surprise and imposes himself as chief, but Yang grabs his clothes and insists on the truth. Zheng grows irritated, replying that amid the chaos, no one knew where they were, and that maybe they had already been devoured by mountain ghosts. Lin is overtaken by murderous fury, draws a dagger and attacks him, ordering him to go to hell and atone for his sins. Yang intervenes, saying there was still a chance his family was alive. Elsewhere, someone feels searing pain, as if the body had been torn apart. In a dark place, a warrior grips his weapon when a sound echoes. He turns, and at that moment, the protagonist awakens, confused, questioning if he was in the master's residence chamber, since he remembered fighting mountain ghosts. He concludes the battle must have ended while he was unconscious, and wonders if his brothers had rescued him. The system notifies that the partial fusion with the spirit of the River Sovereign Lord Loro was completed, granting him the apotheosis of the first realm of the Martial Father, doubling his martial talent and increasing by 10% damage against aquatic beasts. Liang thinks this was the reward for the Mountain Sweep, Demon Hunt quest, and he had not expected Zed's spirit could merge with the Sovereign Lord. He reflects that if his talent had doubled, his understanding of martial arts had deepened, and now he could feel the body's boiling points. The breath, 7.5 centimeters thick and 60 meters in extension, ready to begin flesh cultivation. In only 2 months of practice, he was already near the second limit, an opportunity brought by Zed. The door opens and Huchi enters, saying he didn't expect the youngster to be so full of energy upon waking. Shu also greets him. Shui rises, salutes them both, and the instructor says it was nothing, they were just there to ask what had happened in the hidden chamber. The protagonist replies that after they defeated the last ghost under Zheng's command, he simply vanished. In thought, he decides to hide the fact he had faced a greater ghost so as not to expose Zed. Z comments that he understands, but informs that Xiang had lost his life there. Liang confirms, asking if it was finished, but reflects if someone might have remained hidden in the shadows, watching everything then. And if they were not linked to Zhao's estate, why they had not offered help. Huchi says he will report everything to the master and advises him to rest well for now, since the next plan would likely be a full sweep. Shu comments that he heard from younger brother Li that Shui's house was almost finished with renovations and congratulates him. The protagonist asks in surprise about renovating a house. Shortly after, upon arriving at the place, he wonders if that was really his house and observes that it was a residence with 2 courtyards. A voice greets him, saying he had returned. The building was spacious and beautiful. Liu explains they followed the design of 2 courtyards. Liang asks them not to call him master, reminding that he was older and wanted to be treated as always. The village chief appears and declares that, for saving the citizens, that house was the way everyone expressed their gratitude, even gathering extra money to gift him. Shui replies it wasn't necessary, but that he would use the money to pay everyone's wages, guaranteeing 2 daily meals with real rice, and that the remaining funds after the construction would serve as bonuses. In times like those, even white rice was more expensive than meat. The workers get excited, call him fair and generous, and begin chanting his name. The protagonist asks how the city was doing. The village chief answers that, thanks to him, Yang's martial hall had sent 2 Third Frontier warriors to protect everyone, though their faces were frightening. Liang thinks that if his lord and his father could see this, they would be proud, and he decides he would live his life in the best way possible. At night, by the river, Shui reflects that, since the boat had been destroyed, if they wanted to fish again, they would need to buy another. Since Zed's awakening, he longed for this moment, and remembers that in his dreams he could never see the River Sovereign's act, fearing it was in vain, but now he realized water manipulation went far beyond that. Even in deep waters, he could ride the waves, something glorious. Elsewhere, Zhao kneels and asks the superior what they should do, since the main fortress had been taken and even his chief steward Zheng had fallen. The superior scolds him, reminding that they had eliminated more than 100 mountain ghosts and accuses him of crying uselessly. He kicks him and complains they were about to reap the rewards when that happened, questioning how the fortress had been exposed. He stresses that although many were lost, they still had enough pill materials for now, and orders the boat prepared to return to the cult immediately. Zhao promises the boat will be ready for the envoy by morning and thanks him. Xue calls his father, who looks at a jujube tree planted 5 years earlier that had never borne fruit. He asks his son if he knew why he kept it anyway. Xue answers no. Zhao explains that even without fruit, it attracted birds and animals daily to feed on it. He compares Zheng, Lin, and Master Lu to those birds, creatures destined to be devoured by him, calling it natural selection. The son asks fearfully even about Zheng, but Zhao adds that trees eventually rot, and he couldn't rely on them forever. He states that the Ghost Mother cult was that rotting tree about to fall, and orders someone to deliver a message to Liang the next day. He reveals that that night they would depart for Huangzhou and leave Huang to handle the mess. The next day, people comment and praise the protagonist, saying he had defeated dozens of mountain ghosts alone. Liang reflects that the rumors were getting out of control, probably spread by brother Shu. Then he notices his elder brothers calling him. Huchi asks him to see what the Jiao estate had sent. The protagonist is surprised to receive something from them. Opening the box, he finds land deeds and letters. Jiao had written that the shop deeds were worth 2,300 taels of silver, the equivalent of 4.6 million wen, and that he should consider it an apology. The rest would be gifts to everyone until they met again. Chang comments that Jiao was clearly not an ordinary man since everything was meticulously noted: escape routes, schedules, and contacts of the Ghost Mother cult. Huchi suspects the fortress had been deliberately exposed. Shu adds that if true, their conspiracies ran deep. Gang decides he will report to the master to define the next steps and states they would leave only one escape route. A month earlier, a man calls for Liu, asking if he would go out again to bring food to his wife. Liu replies he couldn't bear to see her go hungry while he looked at the boat on the river. The lady beside comments Liu was truly a good man, unlike that imposter. He quickens his pace, thinking he needed to get home soon, for his wife and Ju would be hungry. As he approaches, he spots Ju ahead, but suddenly someone appears behind him, armed with a dagger. The food bowl falls to the ground, but Liu reacts, defeats the attacker, and says it was time to bring the meal to his family. He moves on, leaving the foe lying behind. Later, near the river, Liu draws water and reflects it had been madness. This would be the last day of the consultation held by Envoy Huang, and when the time came, he would have to face them. A voice echoes asking if he couldn't endure, offering help. Liu washes his face and orders it to go away, but the voice insists he could not be rid of it, for they were one. At that moment, Z approaches, asking if Liu would still ferry that day, explaining they needed to cross and counted on his service. Liu agrees. His wife and daughter bid farewell, and the protagonist, already inside the boat, thinks he could not move yet, imagining enemies were nearby and that they needed to prepare the action, cursing the ghost mother cultists. Shu observes Liu's wife and daughter and asks if they were really his family. Liu confirms. Z comments he had heard of people who wore the skin of others and says it was repulsive. Liu pretends not to understand. The boat moves on. Shu draws his daggers and states he would need to tear off that skin to make him tell the truth. Liu only replies it was just another day. Suddenly, the old man begins shouting, declaring that if he survived, he would have to eliminate the two of them right there. The protagonist senses the aura and recognizes the galloping horse level. Liang raises his spear. Z takes position in front and Shui stands behind, both ready for combat. Shu taunts, saying it was 2 against 1, asking how long he would last. The enemy laughs, replying he was not alone. At that moment, a young man emerges from the water, wrapping chains around his arm and leaping at them. The protagonist notices another foe and feels the chains around him, being dragged into the river. Meanwhile, Liu charges Shu, proclaiming they were ghost mother guards, one in the light and one in the dark, always together. He explains his shadow guard specialized in underwater elimination techniques, and if he couldn't kill the boy in 5 minutes, the child would die. Underwater, the demon drags Liang bound in chains, believing his lungs should have burst already. But something happens. Suddenly, he is hurled against the rocks, stunned, not understanding. Shui, firm, declares that since his fusion passed 70%, he had been curious how far he could go underwater and thanks him for the chance to test it. The demon feels immense force pulling him. The protagonist with one hand grips the chain and with the other the spear. The creature resists and thrashes, tormented, questioning the existence of gods, asking why they never came to save him, believing only at the moment of death would they be revealed. Still underwater, he wonders who that boy truly was and trusts his advantage with speed. If fast enough, he could win. He lunges with sharp claws, but Shui activates his water traversal skill, appears before him, and strikes with a devastating punch, launching him far. The creature is shocked, unable to believe someone at Galloping Horse stage could do that. Shui pulls the chain again, drags the enemy, and strikes once more, causing a colossal impact. Looking at his hand, the protagonist thinks that fighting someone at that stage underwater was no problem at all and recalls his elder brother's words, who was right about returning to the boat. He surfaces and declares that before death is when one truly sees a god. Inside the boat, Liu attacks and says his junior should be finished by now. Shu feels the tension rise when a hand emerges from the water and grabs the boat. It's Shui who states the enemy was devoured by an aquatic beast. He pretends to be exhausted, as if barely able to move. Looking to the side, they see a huge crocodile and Z comments it really was a spiritual beast and that Shui had been lucky. Elsewhere, the imposter who had posed as Liu is captured and taken by the guards. The real Liu watches, and his wife glares at him with hatred and contempt. The protagonist comments that the ghost mother cultist did not seem particularly strong. Z replies they were only a broken generation, reminding that a martial artist at the tiger hunt stage can live up to 120 years, and those reaching the immortal stage even longer. But 120 years had already passed since the fall of Great Qihan. The older generation still endured, some veterans could remain, but the middle generation was finished. Martial artists of the immortal stage rarely appeared, and those men were not the true golden backbone of the Ghost Mother sect. Elsewhere, the superior walked through the village, reflecting that after 40 years within the sect, developing branches and gathering followers, he had finally obtained the great blood sacrifice technique. The sect lacked talents and desperately needed fresh blood. The wolf smoke pill was his greatest hope. At that moment, he hears noise at the door and a huge piece of wood flies against him. The superior unleashes his power and shatters it to pieces, demanding to know who dared. It was Gang and Huchi. They charge together, but the enemy evades, though he is still hurled against the wall, cracking the stones. Gang assesses that the man likely mastered mid-level wolf smoke power, a realm above his own, and that the battle would have to be quick and decisive. The superior mocks, saying he thought Gang would be stronger. Huchi notes that even after taking a punch from his brother, the foe hadn't suffered any real injury. The old man thinks that if that was all they had, none of them would leave alive. A terrifying energy rises around him, and both are shocked by the oppressive aura. Gang releases his mana, raises chunks of wood and hurls them, but the enemy crushes them all with his hands, calling them petty tricks. At that moment, an arrow flies toward him, fired by Huchi. The superior catches the arrow with his fingers and laughs, saying that Tip couldn't even scratch his chi strength. But the instructor retorts that it was enough. The arrow bursts open, releasing acid that burns his eyes. Gang seizes the chance, charges forward, and lands a massive blow. The fallen enemy says he had only been exposed thanks to the dog Jiao, otherwise no one would have come so prepared, but that he wouldn't let any of them escape. He pulls out a pill that begins to emit mana. Huchi realizes and shouts that his wolf smoke pill had run out, and Gang asks why he doesn't surrender. The old man, on the ground, replies that Jiao had said the same. Then he swallows the pill and asks whoever said that was really a pill. Gang is startled, not even realizing when he put it in his mouth. Suddenly, the superior rises, his aura swelling even greater, his form distorting into something dark and monstrous. He asks if they could withstand the power of wolf smoke in its final stage. Elsewhere in the city, Shu points toward the Jiao residence at the end of the street, and the protagonist urges them to hurry. Z senses something wrong and realizes it was on the third brother's side, concluding they were in trouble. A great explosion shakes the end of the street, and a mocking voice echoes, saying cults were always the same, making it seem like they were neither human nor ghost, just hypocrites pretending at nobility. In the past, during the fall of the old dynasty, people ran in desperation as everything burned. A woman near death heard a sinister-looking man claim that all would give their lives to serve the sect's sacred mother. Survival was not easy, but a boy would be taken in, and from then on, he would be called Huang Zejun. In the present, the superior charges at Gang, and the impacts make the place tremble. From afar, Huchi tries to aim with his bow, but admits that in that situation he couldn't even draw a bead. Someone calls to him, he turns and sees the elder brother and the youngest arriving. The instructor admits he couldn't help the third brother. Z reassures him, telling him to leave it to him. Shu raises the bow and Liang watches in awe, thinking that this was the true form of a wolf smoke battle. Gang concludes they couldn't endure for long and needed to find a way to break the stalemate. Convinced the weak point had to be the heart, he had to open a breach for his younger brothers. An arrow shoots at the superior. Gang finds it strange, since that didn't look like the fourth brother's power. The enemy only laughs, saying he already told them those arrows couldn't even scratch his chi barrier. And then Gang realizes Jiao Si was merely deceiving him. Z keeps his bow drawn, and in that instant, Gang charges wrapped in flames at the foe. The pressure in the air intensifies. Shu thinks it's the right moment, and Z releases the arrow. Elsewhere, a colossal creature asks why they couldn't live openly under the sun. An elder replies they were just remnants of a bygone age, and in this era there was no place for them, for someone had taken what was rightfully theirs. He declares that no matter the time, one day they would pay the price. In the present, the arrow pierces straight into the superior's heart, and he wonders in disbelief how it was possible. The protagonist understands the first arrow fired by Brother Shu had been deliberately weakened to fool Huang, making him believe it had been launched by someone at the fourth stage. But the second exploded at full force, at the peak of the galloping horse stage. Liang reflects he still had much to learn. Gang declares it was over and orders him bound with the blue steel chain forged specifically to restrain martial artists of the wolf smoke stage. Even with his heart destroyed, the enemy remains alive, showing the tenacity of such warriors. Finally chained, the superior is dragged out. Shu tells the younger brother not to be impressed by the sight, for cultists always strove to appear something between human and ghost. The prisoner retorts, saying neither human nor ghost, and asks if they had ever lived in caves where the sun never shines, if they had ever emerged from piles of corpses. He screams that all he wanted was to live under the sun, but spoiled people like them would never understand. Z answers that it was useless trying to justify evil as if it were right, reminding that his crimes destroyed countless families, that many children lost parents and many parents lost children. He says glorifying selfish desires was pointless, and that alone was enough to deserve being broken, having his limbs smashed and his heart fed to dogs. Gang then comments that Shu himself was one of the orphans from villages exterminated by the Ghost Mother's sect. The prisoner tries to say something, but Z strangles him. Gang cuts it off, saying it was time to take him back to the martial hall. Shu turns away, Gang embraces him, saying it would be alright, and asks if he wanted to drink later. Huchi also embraces him, promising to show his skills on another occasion. Z grumbles that one day he will crush him. The protagonist, silent, feels something new, a sensation he had never experienced. Gang calls him to come along, and Liang, confused, replies, of course, reflecting that this was exactly what happened when one delayed a manuscript. In the depths of an underwater cave, the catfish sleeps until he dreams of Liang and wakes frightened. He sighs, rubs his eyes, grabs his pouch, and swims off full of energy, but soon notices another fish ahead and begins to follow. He watches each movement of the pink fish, which, noticing, speeds up. The catfish lunges after it but ends up crashing into the rocks and falling injured. He recalls Shui's words, warning not to shapeshift randomly or the Hebo office might notice. He lies there, remembering Liang's teachings that if strength was not enough, he should seek vengeance. Then he has an idea, rises and faces the target ahead. The pink fish notices him and the catfish tries to lure it, but instead the fish flees in fright as if having made a decision. The catfish's companions laugh, leaving him disheartened. Meanwhile, in the village, the protagonist cannot calm down and thinks about the lever, remembering that since Huang was delivered, the lady had exchanged the Jiao family's deeds for hard silver, 150 taels of refined silver, and reflects that the lady had been truly generous. The elder brothers commented that it was probably the first time the youngest saw so much money and was overwhelmed. In the days that followed, Liang accompanied his brothers and defeated other mountain spirits, stabilizing his strength even more. Though he hadn't officially crossed into the flesh stage, he already felt its approach, and that day was not far. Shu calls to him, announcing that the master had returned and was summoning everyone to discuss merits and distribute rewards. Shui asks eagerly if there would be more rewards. Elsewhere, the superior swears he will still eliminate him, calling him a despicable bastard. Z complains about having to eat under the watch of 2 thieves, and Chang replies that it had been arranged by the lady. Shu questions if that was serious and why he was there, since he hadn't participated in the battle at the residence. Chang tells him not to speak like that, reminding that on that day he and elder brother Cao were on another mission. The protagonist says he truly thinks the lady is amazing. She organized everything at the Yang residence perfectly. Gang comments that he still has no idea of the weight her surname carries. Liang asks about the surname, and the blacksmith explains it is Shu, a prominent name in Huangzhou. In the time of the great ancestress, the family produced a grand secretary and several ministers. The master and wife were even courted by Grand Marshal Shu, Wenju himself, and the lady's father was none other than Shu Rongguang, a third-rank official and minister of imperial banquets. Chang observes that marrying a lady to the master would be considered a marriage beneath her station, and Gang jokes to be careful or the master might flay him alive. Master Yang says he heard everything and that everyone had gotten along. As for those 2 thieves, they would be handed over to the authorities that afternoon. The chained superior insists they execute him or flay him, that he didn't care, claiming the sect had many members and countless experts, and they would all be punished by him eventually. Dong, in turn, comments that such an organization didn't even understand the concept of sustainability. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.